All right, hello out there, and welcome back to the Game Dev Show. We're here today to talk about game development with just a bunch of game devs. If you've got questions, make sure that you drop them in the chat. We'll keep an eye on them. But I think we just kind of want to get jumping right into this discussion. There are a lot of different topics that I wanted to talk about. It's Valentine's Day, so this Cupid article and some matchmaking seemed like a good theme and some things that would be worth talking about today. And then we've got just, I guess, a big list of other things. So welcome, Yorai and Andrew. I'm going to move myself to the middle so I can just point out like this. Now I'm definitely pointing at everybody. And welcome everybody that's here joining us live and watching us later. Please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, share the stream if you don't mind. And again, drop questions in the comments or the chat if you've got any for us. So thanks again, guys, for coming out. And hello. You want to say hi to everybody?
Hello.
Hi. Happy Valentine's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy Valentine's, everybody, and happy Super
for
Bowl
you?
Sunday.
Well, Sunday.
Yeah. So there were, like I said, a lot of things that I wanted to talk about, and I think I want to just start with this Cupid article, which was posted down below. I think maybe we'll talk a little bit about it and then give people in chat time to read about it, maybe discuss it a little bit more later or next week. And this was an article that popped up on a place that I never normally use, which was Twitter. But every now and then I get an email from Twitter of, hey, these are interesting things. And this one actually was an interesting little article on game development. And I guess the thought of kind of replacing solid or replacing the solid principles. I personally read through the whole thing and thought that it was pretty useful. I don't know that I agree with everything said here, but I thought that it was definitely worth reading. There was a lot of good info here. So I know you guys haven't both had a chance to read through this whole thing yet, have you?
I've read through half of it. It is a fairly long article, but I got through half so far.
Right. Okay. So the core of it, just for everybody watching and listening, was a new acronym. And at the beginning, I'll be honest, it starts off a little bit saying that they're poking a bear at solid and they don't think that the solid principles are useful and they want to know kind of what would replace them. And they came up with these principles. Now, before I dive into what these principles are, I want to say that I don't know that I would say they necessarily replace them. I would think that these are kind of an in addition or another way of saying a lot of some of the same things and then some extra things that kind of go on top of it. And there were really five principles: being composable, so writing software and code that's actually composable, doing things well, which felt a lot like the single responsibility principle, writing predictable code, which like I think is probably the most important part, just writing code that actually does the thing that it says. So basically having well named code, which isn't really in the solid principles, but probably should be having things that are really well named that are obvious. Maybe it is. Nah, that's not in there that I can think of. And then idiomatic and domain based. So yeah, and maybe we should hold off on this discussion until next week when everybody's had a chance to read through the whole thing. But I thought it was
That
really, really interesting and at least worth sharing and getting out into everybody's minds and have everybody kind of take a peek at.
well, I do want to point out something that you can see straight from the first sentence slash paragraph. Do you call this paragraph, right?
Yes.
So it mentions if it doesn't think that the solid principles are useful these days, what can you replace it? And it's talking about in the second paragraph about the joy of writing code and what makes for joyful code. And then if you look at the Cupid's principles, it's not exactly solid principles. It's about code that would be fun to work with, but so the solid principles aren't about code that's fun to work with. It's about code that can scale for enterprise purposes. Specifically, everything in the solid principles is without question to make sure that you can support more things later. That's why you have dependency inversion, and this is why you have single responsibilities. It's not about having joyful code. So I just want to point it out. Different goals with different acronyms here. That said, I guess you can apply both. I didn't get to read the article yet.
That was the takeaway that I was getting, being still somewhat noobish with even solid and all that. understanding it basic, but then I look at this and I'm like, well, this can't they both, in most cases, be together? It's not like one's not compatible with the other. And even the article I think does point out that the doing one thing well is very similar to the single responsibility principle. I think it goes into some details why it's not quite the same thing, but can't they both get along? That's the takeaway I was reading when I've gotten through half the article. It's long, but
I mean,
that's what I was getting out of it.
yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, code will be entirely scalable and also joyful to work with. But when you have a lot of abstractions in your code, it's not necessarily the most fun. Um, if everything needs an interface so it can scale later, now you suddenly have to jump through hoops to understand which dependency with interface are you implementing right now and what's going on there. Uh, so there are times where the solid principles aren't exactly desired to their fullest extent. And these times are either you're making wrong usage of them or you don't necessarily need to apply them just yet. Uh, but the Cupid principles are probably applicable in every situation because you want to write code that you will have fun working with as long as it's practical and meets your standards.
Yeah, I
Like you,
totally
you
agree.
you can implement Solid without implementing Cupid and just have the worst possible code to work with ever, even though it works perfectly. CK's abbreviations and Yagni.
Yeah, so I think this is definitely again worth a read. I dropped a link down below. A lot of these philosophies, I think, just go towards making the code and more approachable, easier for new developers to get into for sure. So if you're bringing in new people, and easier for you to work with in the future. I don't think it's a replacement for Solid, just definitely a different set of principles to also follow along. Yeah, there's a good comment here. It says Solid's about avoiding misery and Cupid is for having fun. Uh, Having fun and avoiding some more misery for yourself in the future, trying to figure out what your code does. I think Solid is about making the code easy to extend and extendable, and Cupid more about making it easy to understand in general and making it
Yeah,
do what you want it to do. And
I
just I just really wanted to hit on the predictable part because I don't know about you guys, but I've read and used a lot of code that was named something, had a method that said it did something, and it did something completely different. Happened more times than I can count in the past, just going through somebody's stuff. And it's usually because that code did one thing and then it got refactored to do something else. And nobody ever changed the method name, and then the original functionality was completely gone. But I think that this is probably one of the biggest and most important parts that code actually does what it says it does, and it's easy to tell. Like you can look at the code, read the words, and know what it does, and not have to hit F12 and go in and figure out like what does this actually mean? What does this do? Like do thing or whatever the stupid method name is.
Yeah, I do want to tell a fun little story about this. I was working on a jam with a friend, and we needed a way to slow down the game. Now, usually you'd think you'd have some target frame rate and you just lower it down and the game would slow down, or you'll slow down the timescale and etc. etc. And we had a game slowdown class, and how he implemented it, jokingly, was that he made the game start garbage collect insane amounts. And I was like, what the hell is this? So it did what it said on the tin, but it did not behave as expected.
Not at all. Uh,
uh, Yeah, and there could be many ways to do this. So even though you say slow down, you could be more explicit in your naming so that it can be as people expect, because you can slow down an application in many different ways. System thread in sleep. If it has a timescale, you can lower the timescale. If there's a delay, you can set anywhere. You can do that. You can make the process control something longer, and so on and so forth. So everything can work, but you want to be clear about it.
yeah, that probably would
And
have broken the deterministic part right
yeah,
here. If you're using garbage collection to slow things down, it's definitely
yeah,
not going to be the same every time.
Yeah, determinism in itself is a whole giant topic worth talking about. Because when we talk about determinism, there's a lot of things that people don't consider necessarily modifiable. Like, you can say the concept is deterministic, but depending on your implementation, things will not end up as you expected. Uh, that's something that a lot of games fall prey to when they think about networking and floats.
Oh yeah, networking in general, just in getting things right with non-deterministic games gets very, very difficult, and it's something that I think if you haven't dealt with the problem, it's really hard to kind of grasp and understand why it's such an issue until you build that first network game and you realize everything's falling apart.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, just to not leave you in the dark, float interpretation. When you assign a number to a float, you only use 4 bytes. So obviously you can't put infinite values in. And of these 4 bytes, the float has to do some wizardry in order to hold your number and be able to give it back to you, and also run all the calculations you expect out of it. And at the hardware level, can be implemented differently on different machines that you use. So even though you assign the same bits, they will represent different values. And then if you try to have 2 applications play and you expect them to do the exact same calculation, they might not if they run on different machines. And in networking, there are many games, particularly turn-based games, that will try to cut down on the amount of information they have to send to each other. And so they will only send inputs and pray that calculations will run the exact same way given the same inputs through the same timeline. But if the calculations end up different, they start to vary as you let more time pass. And that can lead into desyncs. And then you need to recover from them, and that's a whole pain in the butt.
Yeah, floats are just a pain. It's one of those floats with networking in general, I guess, and just that numbers in networking, starting to send the stuff over and realizing that things are running slightly different on another system, and this character is a little bit ahead, and then having to deal with. Yeah, it gets to be a mess. That said, I'm still very excited about the new Unity multiplayer stuff, and still trying to find somebody who's really experienced to talk about it. I've got one or two possible leads. So if anybody happens to be really good at the new Unity multiplayer stack that's coming out or just came out, please reach out to me and let me know if you'd like to do a talk about it, because I really want to have that done. I think that it's super interesting and good. This is just one of those things that I wonder how they'll address it, or how they address it in their in their examples, if they do at all. Probably not
um,
is my guess. I'm curious.
yeah,
Most
so it
networking
tends to
examples
be a
aren't
rare
realistic.
it tends to be a rare enough issue that most developers wouldn't bother about it these days, at least. And I think I've seen something about a burst compiler attribute to control the float implementation strategy, but I might be wrong about that.
Hey. All right. Well, I think we could probably just move on to some non-code stuff for a second. I did want to ask you real quick, Andrew, because I've lost track. Is the Lightning sale still on? The asset store sale? You had some assets up there, right? Are they still up and available?
It is. They are still up and available. They're getting sold, so I hope they'll sell out at some point. In the next week or so. I think the sale goes through at least another week, maybe a week and a couple days. And it looks like, I mean, if you look at the sale itself, almost everything I think is already active or about to be active. And then I think the concept is it just keeps up going until everything sells out or the end date is reached, whenever that is. I think in a week or so.
Oh, okay. And they're all just basically 50% off if they've already hit that, however many there were in the limited one, right?
Yeah, they start at 70%, then they go to 60%, but there's only like 20, I think, on each, and then it's just 50% for the rest of the time.
Okay. Yeah, I got a couple at 70. I think I got 2 at 70, 1 at 60, and like 2 more things or 3 more at 50. And I missed some of the ones that I wanted, but
Yeah,
there were,
I definitely I bought a couple that I was like, oh yeah, that asset looked cool. I remember looking at that before. I should buy that. It's still 60% off. Okay, that saves $5. I'll buy that. I bought a book one where the pages turn, infinite book or
Yeah.
oh,
infinite,
cool.
something like that. And I was like, well, that sounds good. The graphics on the book itself weren't my favorite, but I was thinking maybe I could change that. Maybe I could update that somehow. I don't know, but we'll see. And then make my own book.
That seems cool. I've wanted to play with some of those before. I've made one of those before, like where you had to do like the little book flip animation thing for a game, but it ended up just getting thrown out anyway. It was like spent a week like we really need this cool like animation, this book that does all these things, and then like we're no longer going to use that. We're going to go to a list instead. Like
Uh,
this game dev though, that happens. You build something out, and then you know it ends up not getting used because not that much fun. So there was a comment or a question in chat you wanted to pop up, right? What was
Yeah.
this one? What is the most appropriate way for game object scripts to interact? Is send a message a naive, poor way? That is actually a great question. And the answer
Yeah.
to the second part is yes. I'll let you tell what the good way is.
Yeah. So I guess you start and I can fill in.
That was my start. Yes, it's a poor, naive way. I would avoid using send message, and I'll let Yori give you some good examples of good ways to interact between. So this is multiple game objects or multiple scripts on the same game object. Two different things you have to deal with. So how do you do those?
So it's a loaded questions because there's two parts to it. The first is how do you decide what type of interaction you want between them, and then how do you get that interaction to be available? Because we know there's a common way to get components out of other things, which is get component, of course. But there are still ways to go beyond that, and depending on what you choose, you may need to do this either dynamically or ahead of time. So let's start with why send message is a naive / poor implementation in general. Your code does not, by default, know to be called by other things. And when you tell Unity, I want to send a message to anyone out there to perhaps call this one method with these arguments, Unity has to do a lot of background work in order to get that done for you. It's not free. It has a performance cost.
That doesn't show up well at all.
Yeah.
I was going to
In a
show the
perfect
screen, but can't show
yeah,
it.
it's fine. In a perfect world, you would cut down the amount of instructions you need to just one. Get the thing and do it. And you can do that actually in Unity by grabbing a reference to the script you want to interact with first, and then just calling whatever you need to call. And there are multiple ways to get scripts from other objects. Now, the straight up best implementation of that by Unity themselves is to use the serialized fields, because Unity can just load things up for you. That works well when you have a scene or just a prefab and things within that prefab interacting. But you can't have serialized fields that reference things that are not in their scope. That means things from outside the scene or things that are outside the prefab that you're instantiating, beyond assets, of course. So when you can use serialized fields, it's the easiest, it's inspectable, it's convenient, and it's performant. You just get the other script and you call the method that you want. And if you need a list of them, you can still use serialized fields and just get an array. And there's a method that's called onValidate that you can put on your components that will auto-collect everything that you need and set it up for you. Perfectly
Well, it
fine to
doesn't
do that.
automatically do it yourself. You have to write the code in on validate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but
So
it's like
in
one
on
line of
validate,
code.
you write the code to serialize out those fields. Say get component or get component in children.
Yeah.
It's not grabbing it for you. And that runs. When does on validate run?
On every change to your class, and I think on the first time that you implement it too. So it should be convenient enough for that.
I believe it runs on builds too, doesn't it? I can't remember now.
I think it does. I didn't check that for a while, so
I can't remember for sure, but I think it might run during a build too, just to make sure.
Yeah. So serialized fields are the best when you can use them. But if you can't, the second best way is to just get component and find that component, keep a reference, and then whenever you need to, just use it. And I'm going to give one more very specific tip. If you know the exact object you're trying to get a component from, try get component is actually slightly more performant and can be very clean to write. So try get component out that component reference, and you're done. And beyond that, you can use get component at runtime at any point of time that you want. You just find the other thing and you get the class that you need. You call the related code. And after that, you can resort to get component in children, get component in parent, or if you're really desperate, find object of type. Now, I do want to point out something that we discussed about briefly before, which is interfaces exist, and interfaces are a great way to extend your code if you want to have many different implementations and easy ways for them to do things. And you can use get component with interfaces, but you can't use find object of type, because find object of type relies on the class extending object, which means your interface can't do that. And by object, we mean Unity engine.object, not a regular object.
Not the C# object.
Yeah.
So why not just use SendMessage though? I guess you can use all of these other options, but why not if you want to call like on the example on the page they've got, it just shows calling this method right here to apply damage, and then anything that listens to apply damage will call that. What's the downside to doing this? Because there are obviously reasons that you're saying that this is not the ideal. So what would you say is the reason against using that more generic sending a message out to everything?
Well, I explained it earlier, but when you have less instructions to call what you need, your code will be inherently more performant. And what SendMessage does is it doesn't get all these things for you. It just searches everything. And if it can find anything at all that implements it, it will call that. But this search is a lot of instructions. And these instructions take time, which is the problem. And there's also the secondary problem, which is you need to explicitly state a message name. Which means that if your message name ever changes, it will no longer find the binding. You need to change it in 2 spots. You're breaking the clarity of only writing things once. You have to repeat yourself.
Yeah, you've got that string there that breaks, and you can't even use name of there because it's not in the same class and could change in multiple. It could change in one class, get renamed, and break in another. It's definitely definitely easy to break, and like you said, way less performant because instead of just calling directly into the apply damage method, you're looking at every object that's active in the scene, checking to see if it has an apply damage method, and then calling it. So your performance is dramatically slower. That said, if you do this like once, you're not going to notice at all. Right? If it's something that you're doing rarely and it's not getting called every frame, you're probably not going to notice. You do this all the time in a lot of systems, it's going to start to become a real big issue. I think it starts to fall apart really quickly. You want to get those tight references.
And there's also another catch with it, which is SendMessage. If your arguments change, then you don't get any intelligence about it. And then your message breaks and you have a bad time and everybody's having a bad time figuring out why this code arbitrarily stopped working because a name changed or an argument changed.
Or why this apply damage method is here and not even used because nothing detects it.
Yeah.
I wonder if Writer detects it from SendMessage now, if it knows that SendMessage is calling into there.
I have such faith in Writer that I want to say yes even without knowing.
It might.
But if you're using Writer, the chances are you already know not to use SendMessage at all. So, well, use the right tool for the right job. Sometimes SendMessage is desirable if you have someone making rookie code and you want to be convenient to them. So you might make a system that accommodates that.
The one thing that caught me off guard was that third-person character controller pack. It actually used SendMessage to send the inputs to the character controller, which kind of surprised me. For a second, I was like, where's this linked up?" And I had to go through and search and find it, and realized it was sending the messages for the input to the controller. And I assume they were just trying to be super generic, but it was confusing for me at first. I was like, "Oh," I always forget that thing exists.
I do want to point out that you mentioned name of before, and for those who don't know, in later C# versions, there's finally a way to get a name of something in the code, so you don't have to repeat yourself with it. If you don't need to explicitly say the name, you can just say name of and put another thing as the variable of the name of method, and you'll get the result, and you get to keep the reference. And this is important because if the name changes via refactoring, this will stay properly instead of being hard typed. And then when you rename in one end, you have to repeat yourself.
Here's the example code too. You can see you pass in name of numbers, you get the string numbers
And
back, or numbers.count,
yeah,
you get the count back, or add, you get the add method name back. So
and,
definitely worth using if you're not using name of.
yeah, and this is actually incredibly relevant in multiplayer systems in Unity that use RPCs, because RPCs tend to get named, and the name should probably be the method name that you're calling.
Yeah, it definitely should be.
Yeah.
Either that or RPC and the name of it or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of them lets you attribute it so you can cut down the letter cost, but it's like cringe.
Oh. Shorten it. By the way, if you're still watching live, make sure that you hit the thumbs up button and let other people know to come join us as well. And if you got questions, drop them into the chat. So, do you think we've covered send message enough? You want to move on to the next thing, or do you have anything else to add on this?
Unity events, I think, use SendMessage. I'm not entirely well, not Unity event, the object. I think the animator uses SendMessage for what it does.
Animation events.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
I've been so far removed from the Unity Animator classes because I'm using Animator that I don't even remember the name anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
But
those are the events that you add into the animation that will call a method in your code. So you can do like a footstep or like a particle on like right when the sword hits or whatever the thing is, for anybody who hasn't used the animation events before. You just add them into
yeah,
the animation, they get called automatically. Automatically, yeah.
yeah, and
Now,
to be fair, it's really convenient to offer your data so that specific events can be called as soon as something happens, and it's visually easy to slide through and see in that moment, call that one thing.
yeah, I've used the animation events a lot for footstep sounds and particles and all this stuff. It's very convenient. But if it's using that same system, it's isolating just the object, right? That the animation is being played on. It's not sending a message to everything in the game. Is there a way to do a send a message but isolate only a certain group of objects so that you're not broadcasting it everywhere?
Well, as you just said, it broadcasts only within the object itself. So and I think it's children. Not sure about that, but I don't think you can tell the Unity animator to do that. But if you're using a behavior state machine, you might be able to do something a bit more concrete by getting a component and then using that. That said, the entire workflow with those is a bit sketchy. State machine behavior, sorry. State machine behaviors themselves might also be fun to talk about.
Which ones?
State machine behaviors. The Unity animator lets you have scriptable objects assigned to each animation state or state machine submachine.
Yeah.
And they can call method. that you can use with the animations, and they can be incredibly convenient if you want to tag on more behaviors on specific states, because they give you entry points for everything related to them.
Yeah, have you used them much? So I just pulled it up to show everybody and kind of see it. You add the script in basically in the inspector here, and you can call it. But in my experience, this was a giant pain in the ass to use for anything that wasn't like very specific to the animation. If it wasn't already part of something I needed to do with the animation, like trying to use it for
So,
things outside of animation, which is I think the first thing I tried to do, didn't work very well at all. At least not compared to the alternative. So I'm curious if you guys had any experience with that.
so I'd like you to go to the script animation reference at the bottom, just so people can see what's actually given to you when you use this.
At which part?
It's the link, it's the red link at the bottom.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here you can see what's actually being obtained when you inherit from a state machine behavior. And you basically only get on start, on exit, and on state start, and on state, all the hooks related to animation.
Yeah, you
And
get the enter, exit, and update, and then you get these two, move and IK,
yeah,
that are definitely animation specific.
yeah. And what you also get is the ability to put object references or field. You get to have fields within the behavior, within the state that you want to edit. So something you can do is control or spawn objects or just anything you need as soon as any of these get called, which has its uses, because if you're starting to make a game and you have, say, a character with a lot of attacks, you can spawn a trail, you can spawn fireballs for magic attacks, you can make the footstep sounds with this system as well, but have randomization for it and not have it at the monobehavior level. So it's a nice thing to have, but it's tied to the animator controller asset once you use it. And because it's tied to the animator controller, it's no longer tied to a specific character. So that means you can't change it based on character. It's being changed per asset that uses this animator controller, which may or may not be desirable depending on your game.
Okay, but you could still get a reference to the object that it's running on and read some data if you wanted to specific to that character, right? You just kind of have
Yeah.
to,
So
do a
you
get component call or something off the animator.
Yeah, so if you look, all the hooks that you get here give you a reference to the animator. And the animator, of course, gets your reference to the game object, and game object, of course, gets your reference to anything else you need.
Okay, so they can use it for that, and I kind of like those ideas of using it to spawn a fireball or some attacks and things. I just watch out for don't try to use it on big like controlling your game state. I'd say there are better options for that, but for things like that, exactly the examples you gave, I think those are really good ones. Definitely worth checking out. I actually forgot about that thing, the animator state machines, since I tried playing with them a couple times and I never really ran into really good uses. But I like that. I like those examples.
My own personal preference is to not use these, just like you. And I've had a phase where I loved them, but I ended up wanting to isolate animation to only do animation and not tag on behavior based on what animation is played, but rather let behaviors happen and also an animation in the way. So that way I can test things even if I don't have the right animation for it.
That makes
And
sense.
it's all in a
I
place I can
usually don't
instead.
have the right animations for things either, which is probably why I was never too heavy into it because my animations are usually placeholders until the last second. I got whatever I got on Mixamo until I can get an animator in there to actually fix things or a designer who can pick out better animations than I can. One of the two. So, should we move on to another topic, or do you guys want to talk more about send messages? Or I guess any other good questions pop up in chat as well? Haven't seen much. It seems relatively quiet today. Yeah, well, let's just jump on to the next thing. Before we get, your eyes got a nice long list of really interesting topics, but before we get into those, I wanted to mention that Dave has a video going out that I'm going to drop in the chat in a minute, so you guys can watch that all afterwards, and it'll be in the link. And I wanted to talk to you guys and everybody in chat a little bit about just networking in the non-technical networking, talking to and meeting other developers, kind of the
in real life.
matchmaking or getting to know other developers and kind of building up a community. I was talking to somebody a couple days ago about getting jobs in the industry, just how to get hired and how to get a position. And I think I mentioned multiple times that by far the best way, the easiest way in is to know somebody there. Without a doubt, if you know somebody at the place and you have the skills, right? You got to still have the skills. But if you're qualified and you know somebody there, like 10 to 100 times easier, without a doubt. So after that, I put up a poll to see kind of what everybody thought um, were some of the easiest ways to meet developers. And I don't know. I wanted to share my thoughts on it, I guess. So everybody's thoughts there were kind of all over the place, but I felt like it would be an interesting discussion at the very least to talk about where to meet other developers, how to meet other developers, and then I had an idea for people who are watching to possibly meet each other and make some types of something more formal so that people can make more contacts in the game industry for everybody. But I was curious, I guess, before I just blab in on like a long rant about it, you guys have any thoughts on just ways for developers to meet other developers, things that you've seen work or not work, or say you're like a solo developer, you don't really know any other game devs, so like you're into it, you find it interesting, but your conversations are all just one way. You're consuming stuff and not really being able to talk to other people and share your stuff. Like, what would you recommend for people to get out there and just make some contacts if they're not working with people already?
Uh,
Tough one.
so, hmm?
You can
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. You can go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So from personal experience, I started by joining a modding community for Terraria back when I was still in school, actually. And I get to meet a lot of great people there, specifically people with more experience than me from whom I could both learn and show that I'm improving. Um, and later I got to talk to the developers and eventually get hired in. So that was my way to break into this industry
How did you get
professionally.
into the modding community for that? What was that
Uh,
like?
So I liked modding games even before Terraria, and when Terraria came out, me and 9 other friends all had a big server, and we played together, and it was like really fun. And the game looked simple enough for me to be able to uh, make something for it if I could just open it up and see what happens. And just so happens that I could do that, so I did. And I made a mod and I shared it on the forums, and then I met someone else who made a mod, and we ended up wanting to make mods together, and it blew up into a whole thing. And then tconfig was born, which is a mod to load mods. That was with surfpop back there in the community. Just wanted to shout out. And it was really nice. And we ended up having a big thread, and I got to meet a lot of people there, made a whole friend list. Back then, we were still using the client for HexChat, IRC, old times.
Okay, so you
And
joined them on IRC. Is that where you guys would mainly chat? Which, for anybody
yeah,
who doesn't know, it's like what came. It was long before Discord, since like the 80s or 90s has been around, like old chat system. So Discord's like the kind of the 10 levels above that. Right?
yeah. So that was forums, IRC, and then we also had group Skypes because Skype was still relevant. um, and So using a forum of a community is good because people who want to bother writing longer messages are going to be there, and they're going to also want to read more. So you can have maintained conversations. They're not going to be instant, might take longer to make a friend, as it were, but it's useful because you can essentially have verified friendships with value, because the people there will usually be some of the more patient, better people to work with. If you don't have that, in recent days, Discords are amazing. Find any community that you can appreciate and just hop in and try to be one of the more involved people, and not necessarily the best, but you can try to contribute when possible, and that would be drawing you in to the people with more value eventually. In my own opinion, this is actually how I met Jason Story on the Infallible Code server. We were both helping out other programmers, and we ended up talking and comparing our approaches, and we became friends. So that was nice. So
Yeah,
these
Discord's
are
great.
easy ways to get contracts. Also, there's conventions, of course. I never got to attend, but I am there in heart.
What about
Sending
you,
emails
Andrew?
is useful.
That's my so in-person things are for me better. I prefer in person as much as I'm like many people. I'm not necessarily the best at networking. It's a when I go to like GDC or the Unites when those were a thing that were in person, it was always like I had to put myself out there. It was a mental drain to just kind of be on it. Felt like you're being on stage the entire time, and every night to just be dead tired and stuff. But it was also one of the most in person things were always the most impactful for me and most helpful. Even like my very 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 first ones were I was fortunate to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and Unity themselves hosted a user group meetup at their headquarters and gave you pizza and drinks and soft drinks and stuff. And so I would go to those once a month, and I would talk to people. And sometimes I wouldn't talk to anyone. I'd just stand there, and then I'd be like, okay, well that was interesting. They'd put on some talks, like short talks. But that's how I got to know the people who worked at the asset store at the time. And this was right when I first started being interested in working on producing assets. And so it was great to have like some inside knowledge there. I got to know a lot of the people from Unity at that time, and then I'd see them at GDC or Unite, and they would have seen me already because they saw me in their office at one point, and so they'd be more willing to talk to me there. So it was just slowly and surely building up like this always around. This guy's always there. And so after a while, even though I haven't talked to people, they've seen me so many times, that's more like, oh yeah, this guy's always there. And it just worked out. And I guess it helped that one time at Unite, I ended up, I don't know how this exactly happened. I showed up at Unite in Seattle. This was my first Unite years ago. And I somehow met somebody in the line for some Microsoft party, and she knew some people who worked at Microsoft, who knew some people who worked at Unity. And that night, I ended up in the Unity party in the CEO's hotel room somehow. So that was David Hegelson's hotel room, and so yeah, somewhere there's a picture of me in a hotel room with a bunch of Unity folks, having just showed up to Seattle, not even checked into my hotel yet, and all this other stuff. So it was a good time.
Talking to
Awesome.
people in line, huh?
Yeah, so there's value in person things if you're able to make them during these tough times. And of course, it's not easy, and this is where it gets really tough because I was lucky enough to live in an area that has these things all around, but I know a lot of people don't. And so maybe there are meetup groups that you haven't found. Meetup.com is a pretty good resource for that. I don't know how many groups there are around the world, but my suggestion would be try to start one. If once in person's a thing for you in your area, see if you can start one if one hasn't started already. I'm sure there's going to be a couple other people who might be interested in talking about it.
And just something I just want to bring up, but game developers are friendly creatures, as it were, and people who contribute in these conventions tend to care a lot about what they say. So, and usually they will not get as much feedback on what they present as you think they might get or as they might like. So they will be very open to discussion if you take interest in their topics. And these interests can bring forth friendships. They usually contain emails. You can hit them up even if you weren't present there and just make a friend abroad by taking interest. I myself, specifically, when I see someone making something amazing that I don't understand, I will ask, "Hey, I take a lot of interest in this and this and that. Can you please tell me how you did what you did? Or I'm taking a lot of interest in this and that. Can you explain?" And then I will ask more questions, eventually leading into being able to know the person a bit more and potentially being a friend. This is specifically more towards VFX in my case, because I take a lot of interest in making good visual effects for usability. But it's still relevant regardless of topic. Difficult questions, interesting topic, niche features of any engine you use, or advanced features tend to have concrete active communities. If you look at any recent package, they have a forum section for their own. Those haven't been up for a lot of time, and there are active community members trying to interact with them, making them better and using them properly. So
It needs to be things
yeah,
like the new terrain pack or even the multiplayer one that I was talking about earlier, wanting to find. So somebody that's active in that community is kind of like the type of person that I'm searching for right now to do a talk on exactly that. So staying active in
uh,
there definitely good.
yeah, and like any recent package, animation rigging, dots. If you want to have any higher level friends, there.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, that's lots of good advice. I think that going to those local meetups is definitely a good idea, and a lot of them, from what I've seen, have kind of started to reopen up now that most people are vaccinated and stuff. It seems like a lot of those are opening up and restarting. So if you can get to the in-person ones and you can go there and just kind of hang out, and like Andrew said, you don't always have to say something. Sometimes you just go there and be totally silent. But after you do go there and be silent for 3 times, somebody's going to come up and say hi to you and force you to interact a little bit, but it shouldn't be too scary. Um, so for people who can't go to anything in person, do you guys know of anything online that people can use or attend regularly? Or does anybody who happens to be with us live in chat or watching later in the comments drop it? I guess if you have some thoughts, but are you going to be as know anything that people can do just remotely to build up a community that's like more of an event type thing? I mean, you already sent me the link to the meetup that I started, but I'm thinking more like for for beginners, right? Like people that getting started out. That wasn't kind of more advanced, a more advanced group. But are there any groups for people getting started out, kind of new into the industry, trying to build up their skills, or things that are just kind of regular that you know of, or like communities that meet? I know of some local ones that have meetups, but I just thought it'd be really cool if there is something like open and available for people, like maybe there's daily meetups that somebody has, or some other type of thing where people can get in and actually just kind of talk and chat in more of a structured format than just Discord, where you got to go in and say hi and guess what's going on. But I don't know, I was just curious if there's anything like that, like maybe just big open game dev meetups or something like that.
I don't know any
Not that
myself.
I don't have anything in particular, but I know that at least in Israel, there's a bi-weekly community meeting with a public group in Facebook for this. So those who want to attend might be able to with that. I never went there. And there's should also be the game jams plethora between Ludundere and Brackies if they plan to run this year, and anything of this sort. There will be many starting groups that just want to work together and have goodwill. And there are usually some tools to help group up. I think the Game Maker's Toolkit Jam had the biggest gem of the year last year, and they had a tool to group up by skills, so you can literally sign up meet random people, and for 2-3 days, try to make the best thing you can together, and just get to have friends.
Get to meet a couple new people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go. You got something, Andrew? Oh, sorry.
Nothing.
There's also the Kenny Jam.
Oh,
I actually participated in one of these, so that was fun.
That's the Kenny NL guy, right? Who makes all the cool
Yeah.
2D art.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
definitely check his stuff out. If you haven't used his art, you're missing out.
There's also models.
There's some really, really, really cool stuff too. So, I guess we got a lot of ideas. One of the things I wanted to just present and put out there in front of everybody and see if there's any interest in, and again, this mostly just be from the community. If people are interested, maybe we'll move forward with it. If not, then we won't. But I was thinking about one of the most useful things that I have is a group that I meet with just once a week. It's just a group of other developers doing similar stuff. Been doing it for a while now. I actually had two groups. One of them I can't attend anymore. That's the one that your eyes sent me. Um, what I'd like to do, or what I think might be interesting, is setting up some groups for just people who are watching, attendees, other game developers that are interested in finding like a small, tight knit group of people. Like I'm thinking groups of 4 to 6 developers who are all working on similar projects, just to meet, get together once a week, talk about their problems, the issues that they're having, not working on projects together. This isn't like a team project. They're all working on their own stuff, but just coming together once a week to go over progress, like sharing it, because I find that the accountability helps a lot. Having somebody to go like, hey, this is what I did, even if it's only I did one thing, it gives you a little bit of a boost to do that one thing, but also to just kind of have a group of people that kind of are familiar with what you're doing, helping you troubleshoot the thing that you're stuck on this week. I do that a lot with game development and business stuff, and I think it would be probably handy for other people. Maybe not. It might not work for everybody, but if people are curious or interested in it, I think that it's something that like to maybe consider doing. I don't know. I don't know what you guys think on something like that. Is that something that you guys would do?
I've been a participant of the architecture meetup that you run for quite a while. And while I participate mostly by just talking and giving ideas, when I do have a problem and I ask it, it's a little bit rubber ducky. It's a little bit, give me some ideas. But what I really like about it is they're often, the questions people ask are like pretty well scoped. They're very specific questions. Like, hey, I'm stuck on this one thing, and I need help. And share your screen, and talk through what you're doing, get some great ideas. Not always will you get solved right there and there, but sometimes the solution will come up, and either way, you're going to get some discussion around it and other thoughts as well about like, oh, well, somebody might notice, oh, well, why are you doing it like this? Have you thought about this or this other thing? And
That's where the good answers come. The
yeah,
why are you doing this, and making you think about it, and then realizing that there's a much better solution to the problem, and you just got down the wrong track.
yeah.
Yeah. I actually had a fun case of this with Jason Story. We were talking about multiplayer with Photon, and he had some issues, and I decided I'll try and make my own Photon project just to try and see what's going on there. And we ended up with pretty different implementations as far as I recall. So that was pretty funny to discuss. Like, I did it that way, he did it that way. Why did each of us pick what we picked, and etc. etc. It's pretty fun to see. Photon has a lot of quality of life features that I think are getting missed out on by the more primitive tutorials. And if you're willing to invest just a tiny bit of extra work, they become incredibly powerful and fast to use.
It sounds like you've got a YouTube video to make.
Don't tempt me.
You've got a topic. I like it. It actually sounds really interesting, though. I'd actually be really curious to see the side by side on how you two approach the problem too, though, and just see the actual comparison. I think that would make for an interesting video. At very least, make Jason record a video on it and talk about it.
Hopefully,
think it
get
would
something up soon.
definitely be cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, if everybody is interested, or I guess if not everybody, but if enough people are interested in that, shoot me an email or drop a comment down below. Maybe I'll send out an email and a poll, and we'll figure it out and see if there's enough people that we can set up a couple groups and see how it goes. Just something to help people out and help people kind of build up some little mini communities that can help each other so that you can get stuff done. I think it's helpful and handy, and there's not, no reason not to, at least that I can think of. So I think I'll probably push forward with it if there's interest in it. Outside of that, there was one other thing networking related that I thought was really interesting, and I probably should just mention it before I forget. So, and I've told you guys a couple times, I'm setting up this GameDev conference coming up in May. To do just mostly Unity game dev stuff, but game dev. And one of the things I was talking to, um, let me rewind a second. I was talking to one of the guys from the Odin team, and he was telling me about another conference that he'd been to. I think it was IDGA one, but I've lost track. And he was saying that one of the really coolest features that they had was this speed dating setup. So you could get in, and for 60 seconds, you would just hop in and talk to another random developer, and then you could extend the time. So not a new concept at all, but a concept that I thought made a lot of sense for developers to just kind of get in, go talk to other people, introduce themselves and say hi, and kind of make possible new connections. Apparently, that was his favorite part of the event, and it sounds like a very fun thing. So I want to try to figure out how to do exactly that too, and just mention that that exists. So apparently, that happens at other conferences and is probably worth checking out. I think it seems kind of cool.
Yeah. So trying to make applications that are small scale and fun for sharing could be pretty huge if you try. Did you see Wordle taking up a storm recently? Uh, so it's a tiny game. You can play it on any browser, and it's
Oh, I have
basically
seen that.
guessing. Yeah. So it got bought out by New York Times, I think, last week. And so that was a thing to add to the pile of acquisitions. But just seeing how much interaction communities get out of this little small game and the single share button was pretty huge for me recently. Just thinking about what you can do in this kind of scope. Um, so it might be fun for you to make a YouTube video about if you want to get.
How to yeah, that's not a bad idea. Just being able to share things. It is something that a lot of people don't think about until the last second, right? Like they're like, "Oh yeah, we should add some of this in there and just slap it on." Seems like a good
Yeah,
one. I wonder if I know anybody who's really good at that too.
I
Not
mean,
just the technical part, but like doing it in a way that actually entices people to play the game.
to be fair, just making it extremely easy to share anything already makes the application more fun, because if you present them as part of the workflow of the game, a share button at the end, a big share button of your result that you might be proud of, people are likely to use it. And in Wordle's case, it goes straight to your clipboard. So it's literally click what button and paste it anywhere you want, which is as simple as can be. The only way they can do better than that is if they put it in your clipboard without your consent, which
They
is
just auto post it for you.
yeah,
Uh,
some people might not want that. But if you just copy it and place it wherever, it's easy. And they also support dark mode, which was funny. A friend, so on Jason Story's server, which you can get through from his coffee, people started sharing their results, and we ended up making a mini game out of trying to get results at different letter counts and trying to see how a little snail of green evolves from different types of completions.
nice. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it. I like that idea though. I want to make a sharing video. Now I know what like I'm gonna end up recording tomorrow. Like, how to pop this onto your clipboard in Android and iOS. Make it pop up and share right away.
You just
Seems
have
like
to
a
make
fun one.
sure that people want to share it because it makes them feel smart. to their
Yes.
friend.
Yes, it's got to be
Yeah, it's
bragging,
visible.
right?
It's all
Yeah.
bragging.
Also, in Wordle's case, they omit the actual word, so you end up giving a teaser of something interesting. If somebody took 5 out of 6 tries, it must be a really difficult word. So it drags people to be interested. The only thing they can do to increase the interaction is to actually include a link to the Wordle site with the uh, thing, but people might find it tedious. So you make your choice.
There was a quick question on blockchain, and
Nope.
I already know the answer, but I just want to say, have you ever developed or worked on blockchain games? I get emails about these every day now, so
Oh,
the
me
answer
too.
is no. I
So
I, I,
still
annoying.
wo- I, I worked on modding and data parsing. I can say that I can make it if I just obtain something out, but I'm not gonna.
I just don't see the value proposition there.
Yeah.
It's just not there as a game developer. As
No.
a dude who wants to make a bunch of money, sure, but as a game developer, like, I just don't see it.
I do want to bring up the technicality though, but if you are working on anything blockchain, it's literally just a repository for getting information and then using it and maybe submitting new data into it. There's nothing special about a blockchain compared to any other type of data repository.
Except it's worth a bunch of money.
Yeah, billions of
For some
dollars.
people.
Forgetting.
And it's also consuming a ton of resources and
That's what
takes a
makes
bunch
it
of time.
valuable. It
And
uses lots of electricity, so it can be valuable. You load
let's
it
just not
up
go
with
there.
value by putting the electricity into it.
Yeah.
Just not.
There was a question about Breakpoint too, which I actually mentioned in my email. There's actually a link to that down below. If you're going, I'm going to go check it out. Their first talk, really, the first talk is the one I'm most excited about because it was about plastic SCM and the new stuff. And I really want to find out like if Collaborate is just getting retired and plastic's going to take over, or what the situation is and where it's going, and also see some of the stuff that I'm sure I'm not using in plastic that I probably should figure out. And it was free, and I could definitely go for winning a PS5. I've still been unable to find one in stores ever. Every time I look, I'm like, oh, yep, I missed that. Oh, yep, I missed that. And so it would be cool. But yeah, I'm going to check it out. So check the links down in the description if you want to go. Plastic's like a virus. I can't remove it. Maybe real plastic. I haven't had any problem with plastic SCM, though. I've been really enjoying it.
It's just a Unity service. You can probably disable it from the Unity services section after you set it
I
up.
just assumed they meant actual plastic.
Oh yeah, no, I mean
Like the material. I don't know.
TSM is kind of a bit more relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be pretty easy to remove and uninstall it if that was the actual thing. And Michael says they are phasing out Collaborate, which doesn't surprise me. I just don't know what the timeline for that is. And
I don't know
to
the
be honest,
timeline.
I like plastic more. It's just now that it's integrated in, I haven't run into any problems lately, but I haven't tried it on a big team yet. So I have to see it in action on a big team to know for sure. But in general, I've had no problems with it.
My big fear with all of those is I'm going to end up having to spend all my time, all the Collaborate too, really, but anything that takes up where you have to pay for the data, with so many asset store content, including my own, of course, plus all the downloads. If I want to use that, I have to be careful about how much stuff I throw up there because suddenly, you add in a new package and you're like, oh, I'll just put in this nature pack, and you don't realize, oh, it's another gigabyte, and you upload it. You don't even notice that it's taking so long to upload, but then all of a sudden you're over your limits and you're paying $5 a month for, wait, which projects are actually being used here? Which ones do I actually need? Which ones can I cut out? I really wish there was like either, this is my personal preference. I think it would be great if plastic was free data for anything from the asset store. So you could go to town on asset store stuff and just say free data from the asset store. Or if you upload it like data in one project, like a bunch of trees in one project, and you have it in another project, don't count it twice because like you're just storing the same data twice. Can't you be smarter and just, you know, like not store the same data twice and just know that it's over there? And, I don't know. There's got to be a way to make that cheaper. But that's my biggest fear about all of those is just that I'm going to end up spending like quite a bit of money every month for just for the fact that I don't want to go through and figure out what I need and don't need.
Yeah, it's definitely not the freest option. Right? Like I think the free option, at least the one that I used to use, was always Microsoft's Git services because they had unlimited size and it worked fast. That and GitLab, they were
Mm.
both great for like unlimited free options. But I don't know what the size limit is on Plastic. Hopefully, it's relatively large because game projects
I
are just freaking huge. So
I think we discussed it before. Wasn't it like 5 GB free or something?
The first, yeah, 5 gigs.
yeah, that is relatively small.
Yeah.
Definitely, like Unity Plus should come with like 50 gigs or something. I don't know. I would say
So
it should be big, especially if you want to get people into it. Let's see, what is it? What is? Oh, got the sizes right here. I'll pull it up and
yeah,
let's see if I can screen share this.
Mhm.
Maybe I can figure that out.
Jack suggests that you can target what you back up. So you can just target the scripts that are going to be changing and not the stuff that won't change.
yeah, no. So that means you'll only have specific things from a package and not the entire package on the repository, but it's going to be kept local in your project, and that's going to cause differences between people who are building the project and have different versions of the project on their internal end. So it's not convenient.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
going to be the point. You could have a separate repository just for assets and then have multiple projects take these multiple repositories into themselves. But that's hassle.
Yeah, that's something most people aren't gonna do. I don't see any info on the pricing for storage here. I don't know where that is.
Hmm.
I don't know. There's options. There's lots of questions here, but I don't see anything on how much the price goes up after you get past the 5 gigs. I don't know. Oh, there we go. You can just put in stuff. Okay. So it's $5 a month for another 20 gigs. And then another $25 a month for every 25 gigs after that. I guess that's not terribly bad, except that you have to be on the corporate plan already, so it probably does kinda get kind of expensive.
Hmm.
Like, then you're at $28 just to get up to 25 gigs for one person. Yeah, hopefully that all adjusts and changes. I don't know. We'll see. If they're gonna swap out
Another,
Collaborate, because I think Collaborate gives you a lot more space than that, for free. I've never run into a thing with Collaborate telling me that I was running so maybe it's just billing me a lot and I don't notice.
I pay
That could be
that
might be on a card that I didn't notice.
might be on a collaborate project that's only using low poly packs, so it didn't end up bloated.
I've had some big ones, man. I've had some games where people accidentally committed like 100 gigs. And like, no, they add in the wrong asset packs and accidentally commit it, and it gets giant. So yeah, Luke's is saying it was the same with the collaborate. It probably is about the same price, and I'm just not noticing where my packages are lower. I don't know. I might need to take a look at that later. So, what other topics do you guys want to hit this week? Is there anything else big that you guys want to get into?
Do you want to talk about your poll from earlier?
Oh, yeah, we could talk a little bit about that. You're talking about the code poll that I
Yeah.
had. Yeah,
Yep.
let me pull that one up and we'll discuss it. So it was kind of a we talked a little bit about this earlier today. Let me see if I can find that.
Gentlemen,
There.
I'm going to cut off. I have to help my
Oh,
friends now. So I'm going to go before you start talking about the code. And earlier today, I'm going to preface this by saying I heard them talk about the code earlier today and I didn't understand it. So it's a great time for me to leave. So I'm going to take this as my cue. So thank you. I will see you all next week.
All right, thanks again, Andrew. Also, everybody go check out his assets in the asset store that are on sale. They should be linked down in the description below. Just go grab them and get them while they're half off.
Yep. See y'all.
All right, thanks, Andrew.
a
See you later.
fantastic day.
All right, so let's pop up the question or the let's see if I can get this in a good view there. Here it is. The question that popped up that you replied to. So this was it. It was a little code quiz, and it was just about what this actual method returns. So I mixed in a whole bunch of different things here, we've got a serialized list of transforms named targets, and then a method here called choose target that returns back a target, and it actually returns targets using the little caret indexer so that it gets the first one from the end. It's basically the last one in the list. But there's an issue with it. So when I was writing this question out, the first time that I wrote it, this was a list of targets. The second time that I wrote it after YouTube went back and I had to rewrite the question because I was doing it on my phone, I put it in as a list of transforms. So the correct answer went from the last transform in the list to a compiler error, except your eye pointed out that there's technically a way that it's none of those. So you want to share what that way is, where the choose
Yeah.
target that returns a target but is getting it from a list of transforms could actually not give a compiler error?
Yeah, so something that's not often mentioned but is used widely in programming is the concept of conversion of data types. And when you have anything, you can tell it, if you're being asked to be put into something that's not your own type, convert to that type. We do it a lot with numbers, with names, with even objects, and wildly with inheritance. But a lot of times it's just closed over. So let's take it somewhere concrete. Vector 2s and vector 3s are used a lot in Unity, right? And you can say, every time I want to make a vector 3 out of a vector 2, I can just make it by passing the x and the y and just adding a 0, right? So Unity did something for you, and they added an implicit converter that will convert a vector 2 to a vector 3 on that way. And if you want to have a vector 3 turn into a vector 2, you can just remove the z1. You can just make a new vector 2 that's x and y. So these are called
Implicit?
these are called implicit operators for conversion. And you can also have explicit one. When you cast, it will know how to cast things properly. This also applies with numbers that turn into bigger data types, and things that want to be shown as a string, effectively called toString for you without you needing to do it. So there's a way to write it, and I think it's on MSDN. Let me just grab one quick.
To write that converter so that the target or the transform would just convert into a target, right? Let's see
Yeah,
if we can pop that one up.
and yeah, sent you a link for it. So yeah, user-defined conversion operators. And
Defined, added in right there, huh?
yeah, and they have a lot of uses. If you've never tried to make one, you can do a lot with them. When you try to, for example, cast down, say, a complex stat type that runs a lot of calculations to figure out what is its value, and you want to add two stats together, but you want to just get them as the result, you can just say, my complex object turn into a float, and then run the entire calculation and make that the float. And then you can just say float value equals that complex object, and you get a value.
Oh,
And
okay. Do conversion back and forth?
yeah, you don't necessarily always have to make it two ways. You can make conversion that's explicitly one way. But to back this up into our current conversation, the source, the target, and transform, you can add converters for things that already exist. And because of that, you can say, if I am trying to custom transform into a target, do it for me. And that can make this question actually not throw a compiler error,
It would just
nor a
need to have
runtime
a
error.
little bit of hidden code inside the target. I guess we need to see
Yeah.
the target definition. I want to do some more code quizzes, ideally with less typos, so that I don't accidentally change the correct answer. It was just funny because on this one, the correct answer was supposed to be the last transform in the list, so I could show the indexer here, but it totally messed it up. and I rewrote it. So I'm glad you called that out though, because it was something I hadn't even thought of and just totally spaced on, and I'd almost forgotten about using implicit converters. It's not something I do very often. So this is a really good one.
Actually, on that note, did you ever look into why would you use caret 1 instead of caret 0 when you're trying to get the last one?
No.
I didn't either, so I was curious.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I don't know. I wonder why. Huh. So
Something
I'm gonna make
interesting
a
to look
poll real
into
quick and
later.
see if people are interested in a in small meetup groups, and put that up on YouTube so that we can share it while we're live. I'll do that while we're still talking about other things. But um, there was one question in chat I wanted to answer before I do that about, is using GitHub a bad alternative? And they're talking back about our source control discussion we were just having about plastic. And collaborate and some of the other options. GitHub is, I think, a totally fine option if you're comfortable with Git and your team can use Git. Definitely use it. It's an industry standard. It'll get you a long way, and it'll be more likely to be used anywhere than any other alternative. So yeah, if you can use Git and you're good with it, definitely go for it. Just a lot of the time, people end up having a really hard time getting their entire team up and familiar with Git. So you might have one or two people that are having no problems, and then the artist and designer are constantly breaking your project or something. So you got to be a little bit careful with who you give it to, and how you teach them. But it's definitely a good option.
So GitHub is perfectly fine. In Relogic, we've been using it with Unity, no issues at all. You do need, well, it's recommended that you set a git ignore file that makes sure to not include the folders that Unity would want you to avoid. I think some of them include the auto-generated artifacts and libraries folder, which tend to be gigantic. Those don't contain information that's necessary to synchronize because it's auto-generated based on other things in your project. So you do want to save space with that. Also, as Sandor Fair mentioned in the comments, the caret 0 would be length, apparently, and this is why we start from 1.
Oh,
They
because you'd
did
be
this,
reading at the end instead of the
yeah.
character one before the end.
Yeah, and they apparently did this because they wanted you to be able to include spans. And if you want a span from somewhere until the end, you'll do span that starts at whatever and goes until caret 0. And that would be until the end, not including the end.
Oh, yeah, I'd forgot about adding ranges. That actually would make a good another good question. I'll put that in as a poll question.
Now you have an advantage if you've been here.
Yes, you get an advantage. So people that are live will maybe know the answer, right, if they were paying attention at least. All right, I've almost got my poll up.
Spans in general are amazing. Not that I can talk about them confidently because I didn't use them much, but it's the future.
All right, I am posting this poll right now so that I can just put it up in between my other polls. We'll see how it goes, and then I'll share it in chat with everybody in just a second. As soon as I find the link, we can start getting some votes in there, just to figure out if people are really interested in setting up some sort of groups. That was kind of the thought. So let's see. Oh, I don't know how to. Where's the link to share this thing? Share, and then it wants me to post it. I don't want to post it. I want to copy the link. Oh man. Here's the link to the
So
community page. You can just go vote on it. It's probably 'cause I'm
um,
logged in.
James Collin says, I've heard Git isn't optimal for video game projects because it doesn't handle image revision as well. Is that true? What's better to use? So do you have an opinion on that, Jason?
That is partially true, and it depends. So what actually happens is it doesn't handle binary files well. It handles source code great, but out of the box, it doesn't handle binary files well. So you upload a 3 GB texture or model or whatever it is, something that's enormous and huge, and you change 3 pixels in it and you upload another one, you end up with 2 copies of that giant file. 3 gigs is probably an exaggeration, but maybe it's 100 meg texture, and you end up with another version of that file for every single one of them, not in your actual project, but stored in the Git repository, because it's not storing the differences between the files. It's storing the actual full file because it's a binary file. With code files, it can store the differences and the delta, so it doesn't need to keep every version of it, and code files are tiny. But with the binary ones, it can't. But you can use the git LFS, which will essentially allow you to mark those files to not get stored that way, and only store the most recent version in the repository, and not store all of the other ones. And the reason that it's really bad, there are 2 reasons. One is that it fills up your remote repository, right? That thing's going to get huge. But when you're using Git, you also have a full copy of the repository locally. So if you have an artist that's constantly updating this texture, and it's 100 megs, 100 megs, and they checked it in 20 times today, they're eating 2 gigs of space on every person's system, not just on the server and their own system, but everybody that downloads the entire repository is getting that. So Git LFS solves that problem. That's what it's there for. Takes a little bit more setup, but it's not too difficult. If you're using Git and your project is big, or you have art that's changing regularly, make sure that you look into using Git LFS. If you're not ever changing the art, you're just downloading an asset pack and you're leaving it alone, you won't see a benefit, but you probably aren't in that case. You're very likely deleting, removing, and adding and changing art. So it'll help once the repository starts getting big.
Yeah, and if you're not using any large textures and you're having mostly pixel art, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Just want to stretch that fact.
Yes, if you're not downloading big assets and textures and models and stuff, you're just doing, like you said, pixel art. It's going to be much, much smaller. You're not having these 100 meg files everywhere.
Yeah, but basically data isn't free, and you want to cut down both the amount you have to send between changes and storing on everybody's hard drives. So use GitLFS if you're working with large assets. If not, be careful of it. There's also the quote-unquote problem that most Git clients will not show you proper image differences properly because they don't have any image previews or comparisons tools. There are some specialized clients for it, but you're going to have to look and compare depending on your likes. I personally found GitKraken to be lovely about that. You can see the image both before and after, and if there's a merge conflict, you can see all 3 versions, the before, after one, and after two, and choose which one visually. So that was convenient for our workflow at Relogic.
And that's this one, right? Git Kraken?
Yeah, exactly.
I've used this one before. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So there's another question I think might be worth hitting, which was from Sally. It said, in your opinion, is it possible to make a full-fledged 2D game using YouTube tutorials for a non-programmer, an ordinary user? I thought it was kind of interesting because, I love the comment right after that. It was exactly what I was going to say. Yes, but you'll become a programmer in the process, right? Like, you might not start off a programmer, but if you go through the process of making your full 2D game, you're basically becoming a programmer. It's going to be part of the process, right? I mean, not necessarily, but most
So
likely,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's
It's
very
possible that you could avoid it, but if you're going to actually get the full-fledged 2D game out and done, you're learning the code, you're learning all that stuff, and becoming a programmer.
It's possible, but it's unlikely. With the rise of visual scripting and most things being able to be expressed in data in Unity, you can probably get by. Like, let's be realistic, Jason. If either of you or me tried to do a no-code challenge, we can probably get by making an entire main menu and an entire game loop just using Unity events and dragging things around and setting some values in.
It would not be easy, or
Disable,
using Bolt or something, but it would definitely be much
yeah,
more difficult.
yeah, not even bold sometimes. With Unity UI, you can just, for example, make a Unity event on a button on click, disable a canvas from start to play to hiding the main menu and just enabling the canvas of something else. And then while that's running, trigger game over with on trigger enter. And there was a component that gives you Unity events for that. And from there, you can enable the main menu again because you lost. There you go. So it's possible. It's just rare.
Yeah, you're gonna learn to code doing it. Getting a full 2D game out on your first thing, if you've never made anything, probably gonna be difficult on its own. But you will get through the process of learning how to code, and programming gets much easier the longer you do it. It doesn't take very long, in my experience, before it becomes somewhat natural. You start to realize that anything that you want to do, there's probably an answer for how to do it. And you just have to really start to understand the syntax. If you can understand the syntax and start to read some of the error messages when things go wrong, it gets easy to start picking things up and making progress, I think, or easier, I guess. Why is C++ so hard compared to C sharp? It just requires more. That's all. It just there's more code required to do the same tasks. It's just C sharp has kind of simplified and cut that down intentionally to minimize the amount of stuff that you have to do to get a task done. That's why. It's kind of the main reason is it's very intentional. You see any other good questions you want to jump onto? Or do you have thoughts
Nothing I
on C++
see. So
versus C sharp?
if you need a performance, but nothing else. I'm biased against writing codes for the computer, and I think having a bit of more respect towards the human working on it pays dividends in the end result. So C++ is a bit of something I don't prefer.
It's not my favorite
So
either. And
yeah,
even with the performance thing, like it you can get better performance if you know what you're doing. Most people do the opposite though. And they kind of shoot themselves in the foot. Like they're not optimizing the performance. Leave that to the people that know what they're doing there.
yeah. There was someone earlier that asked to talk about modding, and I was kinda willing to engage in that, but I don't know anything specific. So
How can we
yeah,
implement mod support in our games?
load some files, replace what you're usually showing. Done.
Now, if you were doing that in Unity, would you do that through just like loading text files that have data, or would you make your own binary format? Would you use addressables? Would you use something else? Like, what would you use? Like, say you wanted to just do something that's not just a texture replacement. So, say it's not just like swapping out the character, but you want to change. Let's go with two examples. One, you want to change like the damage on a character. So you want to be able to adjust the damage on a character. And two, you want to be able to add a new ability to a character. So maybe there's a set of abilities and you want to be able to assign like, oh, the warrior now has the magic shield ability too. How would you support what just I mean, obviously not the best option or the full thought out option, but what would be some initial ideas for how you would accomplish those?
So so generally speaking, what most modding needs conceptually is to get what the person who wants to make a change wants to change, and then respect that. And respecting it means, okay, I got your file, I got your stuff, I got the proof that you want to change. Let me see what's in here. Let me see if I can work with it. And broadly speaking, just reading a text file can do a lot of that. Now, if you just want to change damage, you can literally make a line that declares here is an amount of damage change request and just put a number on it. And if you read that request, you will honor it. This is a config file for all intents and purposes. If your game has a settings file anywhere that people can access, you're already doing this. You just call it modding the graphic settings. And um, So that part isn't difficult. You can just make a config file somewhere that's called damage settings, and someone can go in and change it. And you can load multiple files. You can say, here's the game's files, but you can make your own, and we will also load that and respect it. You just need to determine some order for it, like always load your file first and then whatever is in there. And that's already easy modding for that. And depending on the things you want to respect, you'll just add more fields down that line. So, for example, in Terraria, we have more than 10,000 text entries or item names, projectile names, NPC messages, event messages, main menu text buttons, and all that. The game loads them all from a file and then shows that. And then we added resource packs that say, okay, you can load those files from here, also load them from thereafter. And from that point, from that other place, replace what we have. Anything that's in there, just take that. Use it. We don't care. And the game will show that instead if we loaded anything. So it's not complicated. That part is entirely easy. You can always reload because you're always loading in the same order, and there should be no issue.
You're
Now,
just
about
swapping ideas.
abilities. Yeah, literally
Oh.
just swapping an idea. Now, abilities are a bit more complex because it depends on what you actually want to be able to do.
Well, let's say we wanted to run some new code because I think just swapping
Yeah,
out the data, you've kind of explained that's gotten really simple. You could probably just add in a new ability to the NPCs list. But say you wanted to like add in some new code that like when this guy attacks, he writes out a log entry or whatever, sends out a tweet that this guy attacked. Right? We'll make it a
yeah.
social media thing.
So that's a bit more complicated, but I'm going to run through a few ways. The first one is um, in order to load code, you need compiled code in any form, or rather, the ability to respect instructions. And they don't have to be compiled, but you can. You in the end of the day, you need them compiled. So to make a log, you could, in the simplest way for the user, just say, "Hey, declare an ability via code. In the code, do a debug.log or whatever else we have for debugging messages, and then close off that method. You will take this file, you will compile that file, and you will run that file." And that is a set of tasks that has a whole bunch of char- uh, a whole bunch of steps behind it. But this is the concept. You get someone else's file, you handle the compilation, you handle the loading, and you handle the running. There are methods for it. I think it's called the MS Rosling compiler at runtime.
Okay, so you're taking essentially their C# code, they're uploading it, and then at runtime using the Roslyn compiler or something else to compile that down into a DLL or some IL code, right?
Yeah, and then it literally just lets it load it just in time and run it. I think you can find some assets on the store that do this for you if you don't want to bother with learning how to do all that. There are complications with it. I'm not going to say there aren't. Now, there are other ways you can do, which is using other intermediate languages like Lua. Well, it's not an intermediate language, but it's a format where you can sandbox load and do all that. Uh, of course, you can let users externally compile DLLs, and you'll try to find them, load them, and depending on what's in there, using reflection, you can find the matching types that you want to
Mhm.
honor them, load them, use them.
And you do
Uh,
that by like pointing at the DLL and then doing I forget what it's assembly something, and you can find all of the classes
uh,
with the type,
yeah,
like implement an interface, for example, get all of those back, and then start injecting those to be used in your own code, right? Which is a little
yeah,
bit complicated, but it sounds more complicated than I think it is when you actually see the code. Right? Like
correct.
it sounds like high level, like this crazy thing, and then you see the code, and it's like 10, 15 lines of code total.
Yeah, and to be fair, you can make things incredibly easy for the users. If you make a DLL of your own that says, here are all the things the user should use, and then the user decides to make a C# project, drag that file in as a reference, they have access to everything they need. And then they can just call whatever code they want without any issue. Uh, So it's not complicated.
Is there anything you would recommend people just look up or search if they're interested in modding? Like, are there any terms or things that they should just like do a search for, or games that have a really good example? I know you'd mentioned City Skylines has a really good C sharp modding setup, and had some more stuff going on there. But are there any other ones that you would recommend looking at?
Human Loader for Terraria itself is open source and has you can see the entire implementation if you wish. Very convenient. City Skylines is great for seeing how to make a good user experience of it. I'm kind of blanking out. Just give me a moment.
Oh, hey, those are good ones. What about have you played Kerbal Space Program at all?
I have not,
Okay,
but
I know
I
a lot of
did
people
hear they had
were
some.
heavy into
Yeah.
that and modding it too, but I never could get myself into it. So I was just curious if you had thoughts on that one. Okay, I think that's a good list.
Uh,
Didn't you have
get
some thoughts
there.
on City Skylines too, though? When there's something else you had about that mod?
No worries, but I do want to bring up something before that. Uh,
Okay, go ahead.
so beyond City Skylines, there are also games that use Lua. Apparently, it's very easy. There are some public repositories on GitHub for doing it with Unity. And you can also use addressables if you want to be modern, hip, and all that. Apparently, you can load in addressables from other users and respect whatever is in them as part of your game and load it fully.
And pull
Now,
in like
this
the
should be a
prefab.
good way, but then you require the user to actually have Unity on hand, which might be desirable if you're working with game objects in Unity after all. But if you don't require it, it lowers the bar of entry, the barrier, as it were, and that lets you get a bigger community for modding. Of course, the more power users you have, the better the mods are. So
Kind of a trade-off there on you can give them, I guess it's probably easier to give them more power and control if they have Unity than having to recreate, because you'd have to recreate a lot of that stuff outside on your own. But it depends again on your game type whether or not it even makes sense, because if you don't need prefabs that have this complex hierarchy and a bunch of stuff on them and you just got data and some sprites, it makes sense to not add that extra complication.
yeah, and Stardew Valley also has, I think, something that was open source for loading other mods, so that might be nice. Games like Risk of Rain 2, Dyson Sphere program, and sorry, Dyson Sphere project, and Valheim all use something called Bepinex, which it's mostly an injected mod loader, as far as I remember. It has access to a lot of advanced tools, though, specifically in the realm of using Harmony and all that. It's pretty convenient.
I've
It
seen
does the
Lua
heavy
used,
lifting
by the
for
way,
you.
a lot too, and you mentioned that a second ago. I forgot to say I've actually seen it used quite a few times in different games for things like quest scripting, setting up
Yeah.
NPCs, and for UI modding too. It was always a big, heavy one in UI mods because it was easy to write little scripts that did things, and harder to break the game with Lua scripting. It was very very difficult to get in and actually break stuff. Well, on the client
Yeah,
side, on the server, it was easy. Right?
yeah. To be fair, Lua is really popular because it's controllable and has a lower barrier of entry, and you can express everything as data in it, so it's kind of nice. You can do things very creatively, as it were. No need to know fancy C sharp
Yeah.
concepts.
Yeah, personally, I prefer C sharp for the scripting, but I've seen Lua used quite a bit. It seems very popular to the handy one.
So, talking about City Skylines,
Yeah, so
something very interesting.
mods are totally safe, right?
Yeah, totally. Except if the mod maker decides they're not, and you allow them to load whatever code they want on the user's machine. City Skylines has a pretty funny story about that this week. Let me just pull it up for you.
Oh, we'll have to share the story on screen too because It's a funny one. It was even better once you explained it to me in depth.
So we'll start from here because this was the user-facing side.
Jump over to the Reddit post. This is where I get like 80% of my news now. I don't know if I should admit that, but Reddit is where I find out about everything that's going on with GameDev. Is this gonna fit? No. Come on, fit in there. Here, we'll go to a big window.
So yeah, so Valve had to ban a user from City Skylines modding after the user decided to go rogue, as it were, and attack specific other users who used the mod that they made. Now, this is possible because City Skylines mods are running arbitrary code, which means they can do whatever the hell they want. Any user can
Anything
go,
you can do in C#, right?
yeah, anything within the scope of C# can be executed, which means if a user wants to make 100 gigabyte save file or an amazing mod with a bazillion calculations, they can. Otherwise, they can start mining on your machine, lock you out of it, and do whatever the hell they want. And that's fun. So these kinds of game modding communities rely a lot on goodwill and trust that no one's going to be malicious and that the malicious users get reported. And you use mods at your own risk. Almost any game will tell you that explicitly before you get a chance to load anything at all. But this is the kind of thing that can happen when you add unboxed modding. There are ways to limit what methods users can do even when executing code, and this is usually called sandboxing the mod, which is the Lua we talked about a lot gets mentioned.
And that's where you get much tighter control, so you don't have to worry about them just executing any arbitrary code, installing some service and downloading other stuff and whatever other things. Just running things that you've already kind of whitelisted and added the ability to call, nothing else.
Yeah, of course, you also limit what they can do. It's kind of a balance of do whatever you want except that one thing.
That's the trade-off, right? You make it
Yeah.
open and you get all kinds of crazy cool stuff, but you definitely have some risk there.
But so this is what happened, and in the end of the day, just one malicious user, one huge reckoning of people don't necessarily have goodwill when making content on something that's unboxed. But I wanted to get a bit more into the technical side of it, which is how do you actually define and find a user on Steam, which is what this malicious attacker did. So the mod is actually available on GitHub, and you can see what's included in it. And I sent you a link so we can actually explore that.
Pull it up right here. Okay, so this is the mod.
Yeah, so this is one of the files within the mod, which relies on understanding, hey, this is the user I'm trying to target, and is it actually them? And as you can see, it's very simple. It's using the user's represented ID number, which would be an unsigned long. And then they just check if the platform service user ID is that, if the platform is Steam. Incredibly simple, but very powerful if you want to make special features for specific people, users on your system.
This looks like the kind of thing I used to give Selene special access based on
and even though it looks incredibly clean, just consider that you can use this kind of thing for a lot of features. In Terraria, we have ID arrays for enemy type IDs. So we can say zombies, skeletons, and bats all have this kind of property depending on the array. And then we can just query for, is the type in this array, do something. If you also go up and exit this thing into the transit.framework folder, you can see a lot of other files here. And It's literally a mod, a package of code that can be compiled and put into a game to be loaded. So just wanted to bring it up because it's a fine example of a mod that uses a lot of code, and it even comes with its own C# project. Something worth looking into.
And its own asshole list. So.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Udanaim asks, what's the issue the m underscore variables mean? Do you want to talk about that? Because it's I think we
Yes.
covered this before.
It means it was written by somebody who started coding a long time ago, or was taught by somebody who started coding a long time ago. It was a very big, I'd say, convention in old C and or C++ and Basic. It was very common, like in Basic, to put M to represent that it was a member of the class and not a parameter or something else. Then that slowly got generally what happened is people just a lot of people like myself just removed the M and started using an underscore because it was redundant and the underscore was enough to understand that this is a field of this class and it's not like usually used for a private field of the class. It's still not technically like a Microsoft convention or a C# convention, so I don't heavily recommend it, but I use it all the time. I use an underscore to represent those, and the M is just yeah. I mean, I've heard other people say other words for it, but member, I believe, was the actual reason that it was an M. It could have been something else, and I'm wrong, but that was what
I
I'd been told by all the old guys who used it before.
So there is one more specific reason that why it became redundant to have the M, and this is IDEs got good at showing you what's a variable and what's a field, or rather what's a member. And once we got those better IDEs, we no longer needed to explicitly state this is a member and this is not. Back then, compiling took way longer, and also you had less access to interactive development environments. And because of that, you got issues. Now, sometimes you see p underscore for parameters. That's actually a new practice because people started getting annoyed that they don't know what's local and what's not, and thinking that fields would benefit from not needing underscores at all. People started developing p underscore practice recently. Is something that I've seen too.
I used to see a lot of G underscores too for globe. They were basically static singletons, uh, and they were used as a global indicator that there was like a one of in the system. I would see those quite often. Now, again, I never see P's or M's except for when I look at Dave's code. I think Dave still has some in his, but I very rarely see those anymore. But they used to be very 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 common back in the day. Let me see. Oh, no. Drop that one away. I don't need that big giant window there getting rid of us. Um, yeah, that was an interesting question. I don't know. Do you have more topics that you want to talk about today, or should we just kick off the giveaway and do some more Q&A?
So we have two more, I think. So a fun story that happened to me during the last week where I couldn't show up. In Terraria, there's a lot of things that I need to do, specifically to answer questions from anyone we're working with. And if we're trying to check how bad things can get, I need to run stress tests for the game. The game has a lot of data to manage, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong depending on whatever. And one of those things that I had to test recently was world file sizes. Now, Terraria has very big worlds. If you think about size alone, every block contains some amount of bytes, but we have 20 million blocks in a world of a large size. And when we save that, that means whatever amount of size in that array times the size of the block is how a save is going to be if we don't compress it. Now, duplicating raw kilobytes alone, 20 million already means that you have at least 20 megabytes of data.
Assuming you got 1 byte per block.
Yeah, assuming you got 1 byte per block. Of course, we have more than that. A block in Terraria has to contain a lot of information. We have the tile's ID, which already is 2 bytes because we have more than 255 different blocks in the game. Then there's a back wall behind every block. So that's another 2 bytes because we have more than that, 255 of that. Then we have both the color painting for the block and the wall. So that's another 2 bytes. Then we have the liquids, and we also have liquid types. So every block has a different amount of liquid potentially. And then on top of that, there are different types of liquids like water, lava, and honey. And on top of that, we also have systems where players can wire things up and let them interact with each other. When you pull a switch, it turns out a light. So these wires live within the block itself per block. And we have 4 different types of wires. So all of these smaller things can get bit shifted, which is a whole fun topic of its own. But we end up with a lot of data. And the final result is we get about 16 bytes per block.
Is that variable? Like, is it sometimes 16 and sometimes more, sometimes less? Or is it always a minimum of 16?
At runtime, it's going to be always 16 because it's a block. Yeah, we don't have type variants. It's simple block class, no inheritance, no nothing.
Okay.
And there's a lot of it. And on top of all of this, we use a 2D object array, and every spot of that also has some memory of its own. Now, in a 32-bit system, every reference to an object is going to be 4 bytes, hence 32-bit. And in a 64-bit system, it's going to be 8 bytes. So the size of 16 plus 8 times 20 million. It's not small. And and when saving a world, we want players to have many saves. We need to compress that. There are ways to serialize things to reduce a size of a save. And we wanted to see how much is a worst case scenario world going to be size-wise. Now, most worlds in Terraria can compress down to 2 megabytes up to 7 megabytes because we do something that's called counting and then putting the count and how many times to repeat it. So if we have a batch of 8,000 blocks of air, we can just count those 8,000, know that they're all identical, say, write 8,000 times the number 8,000, and then air block. And then when loading, we can say, okay, this many times of that thing. We load it once, and then we can paste it 8,000 times. And that saves us from writing it 8,000 times, just a 1. Right. And yeah. And we can do that for a lot of things. As long as we have some level of identity within the blocks. They don't share the same liquid amount. They are of the same type, 2 blocks of dirt. They don't have back walls. We can start doing a lot of repeats. And this is why the sizes of the world save files are this small. But in a worst case, apparently, it goes all the way up to a quarter of a gigabyte per world. And this is not ideal because you have systems that let you cloud save or store information in a limited amount on platforms like Nintendo Switch, which will limit what every game can have, so a game doesn't bloat and kill off your system from a bad save. So apparently, a single world can go beyond what the Nintendo Switch can let us have for a single save for the entire game.
Oh man! And now to get a worst case scenario, is that just like taking a bunch of different tiles and randomizing them so that there's not these batches?
So,
what does that involve? How do you make that test to see what your worst case is?
Well, to see the worst case, you need to know what you're breaking. Going random isn't going to necessarily give you the best result. It's going to give you a random result. It could be perfectly aligned so that you never have an issue of compression. So that's definitely not what you want. What you do want is to see what lets you batch those saves together and then prevent it every single time. And on top of that, if you compress a single block of information into a smaller thing, you have to not let it do that. In Terraria specifically, we write out a byte early on that has flags for is the tile type, the block type, smaller than an ID of 255? And if it is, we only save one byte for it. So to break that, I had to use only blocks of type that's actually bigger than that. And then if we have a wall that's smaller than 255, we had to also do that. And if we don't have any liquid, we can not write a liquid amount byte by just having a bit at the start that says there is no liquid here. And there's a lot of ways to trim down the cost. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So I just wanted to bring it up because serialization and compression are huge topics, and you want to be able to know and do them if you have to transfer a lot of information or just contain it.
So it sounds like you were able to solve it though, just by working through the
It
compression.
it wasn't about solving how to make the worst world.
Well, I
Is
mean,
what I
solving
covered.
how to make
Yeah.
the worst world not as bad, I assume.
No,
Right.
so I wasn't trying to optimize. I was trying to give a worst test case
Oh, okay.
scenario.
So you weren't
So
actually looking to fix the problem in that
yeah,
scenario. I
no,
assume it's not an actual real world problem then that you have.
no, it's more of a query regarding how to do a certain thing and how bad can it really get. Do we need to look more into it? And that was the question. Do we need to look more into it? What's the worst that can happen? And I had to figure out what's the worst that can happen and show a proof. So I had to figure out how to do it and then make the worst world possible. Which, by the way, is a world full of checkboard background of ice walls and spider walls with arrow signs over the entire thing 20 million times, with a dousing of honey over the entire world, with different colored paintings of the rainbow on every single arrow sign and ice block.
Oh man.
An absolute clown world. Also, apparently it breaks rendering because I got like less than 10 FPS.
Nice. Gonna get a bunch of people recreating that now, showing off their giant saves. That's good stuff. So you decided then, I guess, afterwards that you don't need to address it yet. At least it's not a big enough
And
issue right now. But
it
you have an
wasn't for me.
idea.
It's for one of the companies we work with. So
Oh,
Terraria is externally ported, and
and they want to know what the worst case is. That makes sense.
both of us wanted to know because I'm helping on an issue. But yeah,
Yeah, that totally get it. It's a very interesting one. It's one of those where
fun
you
work
just
day.
was that only a 1 day thing, or did it end up
Yeah, it
taking
was
more?
less than 1 day. It was more like 45 minutes to figure out exactly what I need to do, and then like 15 minutes to write a script to completely ruin a world forever.
To destroy the world. You ruined the
Destroy the
world
world,
in
yeah.
15 minutes, huh? That quick. That was nice and quick. All right, let me pull this thing up and get ready to start giving some stuff away. I think there was one more thing you wanted to talk about today, though, right?
Uh, yeah. So I mentioned before that on Infallible Code server, I made JSON story.
Yeah.
And on that server, there was also another person that I've talked to frequently, going by the nickname of School ID. And they recently put up a game on Steam, and I just wanted to share that because both Jason Story and I played it recently, and we compared notes. And it's a free demo available for download, and it's really nice to look into. I particularly liked that it respected user inputs pretty well. It's a really neat action game. It has some fun exploration. Jason Story loved the level design, so that's something to keep in mind because you know how particular about it gets.
Very, yes. He's big
Yeah,
on making interesting, good levels. It
yeah,
does
and it
look
has
very cool.
yeah, and it has puzzles on. It's worth looking into because this is made with Unity, and you can probably reach out to him and figure out
It looks
things that you
very
want
cool.
to
Yeah,
ask.
I just linked it in chat so everybody can go check it out. It was a free demo to download. I've got it downloaded. I didn't get a chance to play it yet. I grabbed it right before the stream, but I want to give it a play. It looks really neat. It looks like there's a lot of different stuff going on, a lot of different gameplay mechanics. Is that
Yeah,
accurate, or is it just a really good trailer?
no, it's entirely accurate. I played the entire thing, and everything you see here is in the game and working as designed.
It seems like it's just got lots going on. It looks really neat. Definitely be interested in talking to the guy.
Yeah, and there's also some achievements, and apparently there's one for trying to beat the entire demo in 15 minutes, which looks utterly insane to me because it was pretty difficult. um, well, the
Nice.
last boss was. Uh, yeah,
But yeah, go check this out, guys. If you're watching in chat, I'll link it in the description too. Go grab it and try it out, and
it
we'll talk more
for
about this
those
next week when Jason's on too. I'll play it.
yeah for those saying that it looks like Nier, it's literally the first
Yeah,
four words in
near
the
inspired.
synopsis is it's Nier inspired. So
Yes, it definitely seems cool. Also, if you've got a game you've been working on and you want to just share it and show it, shoot me an email, send it over. If you've sent me one before, make sure you send me another one and I don't miss it too. Or maybe talk about them online, especially if you got a trailer up on Steam. We can show everybody and let everybody get in and kind of go check it out, download the demo and stuff, and then reach out to you and ask you questions about how you made it because that's what's going to happen next. This is definitely a neat one though. All right, I'll close that out and I'll go check that out. Probably play it later on tonight. So, I was there anything else on that? I don't want to cut you off there.
Yep. I just wanted to say it's fun to see people actually making games and putting them on Steam using Unity because a lot of us have this syndrome, as it were, that we never finish a project.
Yes,
uh,
that is very common. I was at most game developers don't get to the point where they decide to release things. I think it's a lot better to just get out there and start releasing stuff and then iterate on it. Don't just wait and wait and wait. Just get the game out there. If it sucks, you can take it down. If you change your mind, you can take it down. But put it out there, start iterating on it, and get it out there in front of people. 'Cause it'd be a lot more likely to actually finish and get it done once people are playing it and trying it out. I think at least that's been my experience. So
yeah, and for those who mentioned the Nier inspiration, I have a friendly challenge for you. Try to replicate mechanics from games you appreciate because you might find that it's a good way to learn skills that you didn't think you'll gain from it. A lot of systems, especially if you don't know how to recreate them, will send you off on a journey of finding how to do something the best way or trying to put your own spin on it. You'll find that there's a lot of complications and you're going to become a better developer for it. Um, in particular, I tend to look at most games these days with analytical eyes of how do I make this. It particularly happens with VFX, but it can happen with many different things. Recently, I had the pleasure of playing through Celeste again. And if you don't know Celeste, it's a 2D platforming game with very good user input respect. A lot of fun levels and good visual features. They have mirrors that show the player character as they come across, and they distort player character's image. They have nice ropes that I think use Verlet integration. So that was nice to see, like webs that you can hop on and they react to the player character moving. They implement all the best practices for platforming, like coyote time and snapping you to walls and buffering your jumps, wall corrections. It's a nice thing to see and think about, and it's even more interesting if you try to think about how you'll do this in Unity, because Unity and mirrors in 2D is a fiasco.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I like doing that too, though, just going through and trying to recreate the different features and functionalities in the game. Because I think, like you said, you find all kinds of stuff that you don't even think about when you're playing the game until you get in there and try to recreate it and figure out how to actually do it and see how complicated it actually seems once you're writing the code, and you definitely learn a lot, and you don't have to try to figure out the fun. That's my favorite part about recreating existing games is you don't have to figure out how to write the code, make it work, and make it fun. It's already fun. You already know what the fun part is, and you're just worried about making it work now. Make it work and make it feel the same.
Yeah,
So
and
for me, it's
also
my focus.
if you try to add your own spin on it, you have to figure out how to make it fun again. But to be fair, you already know the base is going to be exactly as you imagined, and you just have the goal of replicating it. Which it's not a small goal, depending on how complex the features that you're trying to copy is. But it's a good practice, and seeing something that tells you it's near by telling you it's near inspired means he put a lot of effort and he did it right. So
Yeah,
try to figure
totally.
out if you can do it too. It's a nice challenge.
Yeah, go check that one. I'm gonna drop the link in. Oh, that's not the link. That's the wrong link. I'm gonna find the link and drop it in chat one more time too, so everybody can go check it out. And if you want to enter to win a 1 year license for Rider, now is the chance. All you have to do is choose a race or class or both. Let me see if I can get that to pop up big for just a second so everybody can see the options. The options are right up there. You can be a tank, a DPS, mage, mod, fluffy, ninja, pirate, tank, or any one of these races. And I think if you choose one of these, you'll just get DPS or tank by default. If you only choose one of the others, you get a knight by default. Still need to make some improvements to the thing and make it fancier, but it's really just meant as a random picker to see who's going to win the free copy of Rider this week. So if you're interested, you like writing game code, you should definitely be using Rider. You should sign up. Just choose something, and we'll start the battle in maybe 5 minutes. Once we've got, once we get to 50 battlers, I'll start a timer and we'll get going. So join now, or miss your chance to win a copy of Rider until next week. And also, thanks to JetBrains for supporting this. They've been really awesome, just giving us codes to raffle out. And I mean, we all talk about Rider because it's our favorite code editor. It's my favorite code editor, at least. Made things quite a bit easier, and it just makes it so like I develop faster. If you haven't used it, try the free version, or just win a copy with us today. Just wanted to share that and mention it. I'm going to shrink that window down just a little bit for a minute. There we go. We'll go down like that. Get the arena small and us somewhat bigger again. I've forgotten what other things I wanted to talk about. I don't know if there was anything else.
Here's a fun one. When we're talking about testing games, I mentioned earlier that one nice way to test lowering the speed of the game is to lower the target frame rate. And in Unity, I found that it's particularly useful to make a debug feature with a hotkey that says, "Run my game like a potato, please." And recently, in one of your videos, I saw that you added a menu command that had a hotkey of its own. And I just wanted to bring it up to people that Unity literally has application.target frame rate number that you can set. So I challenge you, try to make the target frame rate go down to 10 or 5 when you click a button, so you can always check that your game runs well at low FPS. Because this is a test that a lot of games will fail and will let characters go through walls or do a lot of weird things really slowly or really badly. And checking your game at low frame rate is kind of a must-have if you want to target variable devices. Or
It's a
have
good
any.
idea. I didn't thought about making it a hotkey. It's something I rarely remember to test too. So I think it's a good thing to call out. Like actually just checking it at different frame rates. So did you make a hotkey like to switch between normal, like your maximum, and then like a 5, a
Yeah,
10, and a 30 or
unlocked
something?
and unlocked and locked down, and then locked down even lower, and then back to unlocked.
Oh, okay. So did you just hit the same hotkey over and over, or did you
Yep.
make it multiple hotkeys? Oh, that
No, I
makes
made it one hotkey to make it ergonomic. 2 clicks is nothing.
Yeah, just switch right through it. I like that idea. It's a good one. Catch all kinds of issues.
Yeah, there was one nice video about tackling such issues with CodeMonkey, and recently I also bumped into this issue myself, where I wanted to have a character moving on a navmesh, and I didn't want to use a navmesh agent, so I used code from Unity to get the navmesh path without an agent, and I made my own traversal for it. And as part of a test, I wanted to see what happens if in one frame I move through some walls, around some walls to be precise. How would a trail for my character look?
Oh,
And I figured that's going to look entirely broken. My path, because of how Unity trail renderers work, they pull for your position every frame. You don't get to tell them, hey, there was a position here. So I figured it's going to be entirely broken. And to my surprise, it worked perfectly, which is wrong. and it took me 2 hours to figure out why is it going wrong. And then I noticed that my game is running in incredibly high FPS, and what ended up happening is my character was making an instant perfect one corner movement every frame, so that it made perfect trails. Because I had high frame rate, I couldn't discern that it wasn't running it right. It wasn't completing the path in one frame. It was completing a portion of the path, one corner every frame. So it made perfect paths for me. And then once I fixed it, all hell broke loose, and I had to fix trail renderers, and then I ended up exposing the class because it's complete. It has issues.
wait,
Never use
why did
trail
it fail
renderers;
to
they're
add a
evil.
player? I just
Hmm?
realized that we. Oh, okay, there we go. We got people coming in. I wanted to. Weird. What is? I was sorry. I was looking at the error message down below. It says it failed to add somebody. I wonder why. What is that? Update the model. Oh, it's bugging out updating their class. They're already added. Got it.
Okay.
But their class is wrong. Interesting. I found the bug in here. So you can't see the code, the error, but
Yeah.
there's an error saying that it failed to add players. It's not actually failing to add players. It's a bad error message. This says failed to add them
Okay.
all. It actually failed to set their race and class. I would share the window, but then I have to
Yeah.
switch over to Writer and show it. I'm gonna unpause though and
Keep
let
keep
everybody
keep the
come in.
stack trace though, so we can fix it later.
Yeah. Well, I know, yeah, I've got it up here in Writer. I can see exactly where it is. There's a try catch
Just
around updating the player model and the player class, and for
yeah,
some reason it's throwing an exception. I
just
don't know
don't
why. There
clear it.
must be a try catch there because it was throwing an exception and nobody wanted to debug it at the time. So figure out what it is.
Uh, Not me. I have a strict policy against having any sort of try catches in my code unless it's very third party.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it was here.
Speaking of, actually, on that note, fun story. Terraria used to have over 200 try catch blocks.
Oh, I
Yeah.
hate them
So
in general. In general,
yeah.
I think that
So
try catch blocks are a sign that there's a problem that needs to be addressed, which is exactly what it is here. It's a sign that there's a problem that needs to be addressed that nobody had the time to address right before it went live, probably.
yeah. So it's more than just that. There's a very strict problem with try catches, and it's a cost that a lot of people don't like to pay, which is trying doesn't take a lot of performance. So you can just say, oh yeah, I'll let my entire code try. What could go wrong? But catching is an incredibly slow process. And when you let errors happen every frame, and you let them be caught every frame, you're crippling your game's performance terribly. So even though it's a nice way to get around the problem, do try to solve it properly without having to try and catch. Um, Usually, just getting the arrow should suffice to know what's going wrong, because you can stuck trace the entire thing. You can see what lets the invalid state happen, and then you can explicitly say, if in this invalid state, solve it, please, instead of just ignoring it and letting it stay corrupt.
Yeah, I totally agree, and especially if it's hitting every frame. My big issue is I'm gonna start the battle as soon as we get one more battler,
So
though, on an even
yeah,
number, but my biggest issue with try catches was always the unintended consequences of, something not completely running and things bailing out and then stuff getting into weird, bad states. It was especially bad with MMO development because there would be try catches on the server and then suddenly a character's in some weird state and items are duplicating or a character's or an NPC is invulnerable or something because there was an error there. They didn't understand the problem or the cause of the error, so they added a try catch around, try to log it, and then that caused another unintended side effect of an even worse error that they don't realize is happening because the thing that they're bailing out of is required somewhere else, and they're just kind of hiding and pushing the error off somewhere else. So that's been my experience with it. Is that most of the time, not always, but most of the time, try catch blocks are just a sign that there's something that needs to be addressed. Sometimes it's because there's an actual use, like you've got an external dependency that may fail. It may be some network thing, some hardware thing, or some other library. But in general, it's yeah, a bit of an issue. All right, I'm just going to start the giveaway now. We,
yeah.
we we don't have a 56th person. That's totally fine. I'll kick it off and let everybody start battling. And then I'm going to debug these errors after. Maybe I'll do that on a stream sometime. Oh, we got Game Driver in there. Nice. Game Driver is
Uh,
a application for testing Unity games. It's actually like a automated game testing solution. I was watching a talk yesterday. No, day before yesterday by the Game Driver guys and some of the applications that they had. So kind of interesting. It just runs like you build up tests and then run tests on your actual game instead of unit tests or integration tests. It actually like, plays through the game and accesses the objects and stuff, which is pretty cool. I didn't see if he won or lost though. Oh, lost. Game Driver is out. Defeated with James and J Man and Sandor. Oh, can you guys see the text? You can't see it down there. Oh, I've got to change the view here too, so everybody can see
so
the full battle. I just realized some
um,
of these fighters are off screen. Yeah, go ahead.
somebody mentions that if you code that froze, you should try and catch somewhere. The counter argument is that you should not call code that froze. You should never have an invalid disruption state. You should always handle it gracefully, so that no one needs to handle these kind of issues. Because the purpose of trying and catching is to have handles for when everything goes wrong beyond repair. And why? That's the only purpose they exist for. Something else, someone else's code that you have no control over, cannot comply with what you asked it to do. And it's telling you that it broke, and it gives you the best guess of why it broke. You cannot control it, you cannot edit it, you cannot make it better, but you can catch it and try to recover on your own end. It specifically exists for others to consume your code without their ability to change your code. This is the only reason that you should ever add an error throwing in your application, as far as I understand errors.
That's been
Now,
my
if
general understanding too. That usually the only time I've seen a valid argument for writing a throw is in some sort of a library where they're expecting exceptions. The caller is expecting exceptions on a failure that there's no control over, so like I said, network error or something else going wrong. That's an issue. Ideally, not for things like bad input. If you try not to
so,
minimize exceptions, try not to use them.
yeah. So I'm just going to give an example, but suppose you are asking the file system to give you a file at a certain path. If this file does not exist, it cannot give you a file. But you told it, give me the file. So it has to tell you something went wrong beyond reconcilable efforts, and you need to deal with it. So it will throw an error at you. This is exactly what happens. You need to avoid this. It gives you the tools to. It lets you check if a file exists before you try. This is what you should do. Your code should be graceful and not have these errors.
I generally agree. No try catching. I used to use them all the time, especially when I first started coding. I was like, "Oh, I can just add a try catch around it, and now it won't blow up anymore." And then I realized I had to undo all of those years later, right? Or not even years later, relatively quickly as I saw them breaking other things. How are we doing on the battles here? We got 22 fighters left. Actually, technically, we got 26, 25, 23. I don't know. It's bouncing all around.
Random thinking, but is it my imagination or did this thing get unnecessarily bright again?
It
Wasn't it
looks
less
like
bright last time?
it did. I think one of the point lights here is cranked up to like an 8 and it should be like a 2. Which one is it? It's one of these lights. We're going to miss some fighters here. Sorry fighters if you're in the
Don't
back.
miss them.
One
Just
one of these
mow
lights
them.
on here is way too bright, and I don't remember which one it is. There it is. It's that one right here. Point light. The one named point light is too bright. It's super
There we
super
go.
bright. It's
Now we
like
can see
blinding.
people's classes.
Yeah. Yeah. Now colors show up again. I don't know why. It probably is. I always change that when we're playing, and I haven't done it when we're not playing. I have to do some more changes to this thing. One of these days soon, I want to make some big additions to this thing and turn it into like a battle royale. And then I want to add Salim into the call too because he's here. What's up, Salim?
Salim.
Hello,
I remember you.
I'm alive.
Are you watching the battle now? I
I'm
just
watching.
just
Yeah.
fixed the beautiful lighting here. Yeah, 8 fighters left. Tasteless software just died. So how have you been the last couple weeks, Salim?
Good, good. Just getting over that stupid cold and dealing with work being crazy. So it's been tough to get free time. But today is Super Bowl day, so I have some free time.
You ready to watch some football and play some video games?
Hell
Or
yeah.
make some video games. You gonna make a new Madden game now that it's football day? Does it inspire you to make a new football game or football manager?
Nah, I think EA has locked down the license for the NFL
You don't think you can
indefinitely.
get that away from them? Like,
No.
hey, I really want to make a better football game. Just tell them. This football game does not have enough weapons and spells. We got to add some more. All right,
um,
let's see what we got here. We got 2 last fighters and nice comment there. Oh, nice. Interesting hearing some insights from a Terraria dev. Got into coding by modifying or modding Terraria and Starbound. And like you said, you got into coding by modding Terraria too, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
It's always fun to hear about people modding the game, and I actually follow the Twitter accounts for some of the bigger mods, and there's also a showcase channel on the Team Loader page, and it has some really nice visuals. So it's always fun to hear about people modding the game and figuring out how it works.
it's definitely a good way to get into games. Slim, did you do any game modding before you got into the game industry?
nah, man. I did game reviews. That's what I did.
More game
All I did was
related
play
stuff.
games. Write guides on how to get past them and play more games and then write about whether I liked them or not. That's about
Uh,
it. And then everything
Gotta
else.
know game design to review it.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I never like. I mean, I did some stuff way back, but it's like little random things, nothing significant.
yeah, mine was the same, totally insignificant, little tiny things.
Most of my game modding experience is doing paper pencil, dungeon dragon stuff, which is pretty involved as well, depending on how far you want to take it. Because you have to be pretty damn creative and uh, creating dungeons and stuff with cool traps and managing different personalities and people. Is kind of an example of dealing with a live game and customers on many levels because people playing paper and pencil games can get uh, pretty irate when you're talking about killing their characters and stuff that they've invested years of time in just because they made a bad decision. So yeah.
Well, I'm sure
That's why
people playing online games never get irate. So,
EverQuest players, EverQuest players would get irate when they couldn't get their corpse after 24 hours and they lost all their stuff. They would get
disappear.
irate.
I remember that. Yeah. Like, no, mom, I can't go. I have to forget my corpse. Like, what do you mean you have to play this video game? Yeah. Yeah, you guys are mean. All right, let's
No,
do
this
this
game
final
can't
battle real
stop.
quick. Go ahead. You're right.
I'm saying this game can't pause.
It's so
Yeah.
funny. My wife is one of the few moms that now understands what that means.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
most moms don't, but my wife knows now. Like, this game can't pause, and she says, "I don't give a damn. Your game's not that important anyway." So
You
she's
know,
learned the way around it.
when I was young, I actually got my mom to play MapleStory, and she ended up making her own account in it.
Wow.
And she ended up playing it more than me.
Oh, wow.
And I think one time someone called her, and she actually said that she can't pause the games and give her to get out of something. She was in a party quest, I think.
Oh, that's awesome. All right,
Oh,
let's
that's
do
good.
this final battle real quick between Vicot and User Care. I think that's right. It'll be the final battle. Oh, and this is both. Let's see, they're both ninjas. Ninjas are definitely getting nerfed. I got to remember to do that. We'll nerf ninjas next week.
Ninja rats.
2 ninja rats. Let's see which one's the winner. And at least it's very even, right? It was very, very even
Yikes.
odds. I gotta share the updated code. You know what? I think
Oh
I'll do
my
a stream this
goodness.
week, update the code for this thing, and share it so everybody can kind of go through and see how to build
Wow.
Wow.
their own auto
Nice and
battler. Well,
close.
congrats, Vicot. Send me an email, and I will shoot you over your writer code sometime after the stream ends. So just send me an email, just jason@game.courses, and
Very
we'll
nice.
get that sent over to you. So congrats. Again, writer's freaking awesome. So it will definitely help, and it's a 1-year license. So highly recommend everybody go check it out and try it.
This is
I
my
remember
first time
EQ2
seeing that
too,
in a while after I tried to help but got sidetracked. So
with the
it looks
battler.
awesome.
Yeah, I wanted to swap out all of the art models very soon with Andrew's low poly ones, or maybe use his high poly ones. I don't know. I also want to make an auto battler, but I also have like 10 other things that I want to do. So it makes it difficult. It got a lot of things got to prioritize and stuff. Yeah, that was definitely a good battle though. I got my red vines now. So, Saleem, did you have anything you wanted to share this week, or just talk about before we wrap things up?
Oh no, I just wanted to pop on. Sorry I was late. I'm slow cooking some chili for the family for Super Bowl, and it took a little bit longer to set things up. But I planned on being here when it started. Sorry. Well, no, not really. Just wanted to pop in, say hi, let everyone know I'm still alive. And hopefully I can get on here on Sundays more regularly like I was before. But that cold kicked my ass, and like at work, I'm just wake up, 5:30 in the morning. I go to bed around 11:30, 12, and most of that is just working. So I just been like super busy. So yeah,
That's
I hope that.
definitely a lot of work. Real quick, since you mentioned that, it's probably worth talking. We talked a little bit about this last week about
Yeah.
work-life balance and game dev stuff and what
Mhm.
it's actually like how much people are actually like forced to crunch versus how much people crunch on their own because they just can't help themselves because they really love what they do and they're obsessed with the project, and
Yeah.
when they stop thinking about it and they go do something else, their mind just instantly goes back to it.
Yep.
So
That's me.
do you guys have thoughts on that? Like, I don't think I got to ask either one of you guys about that, and
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. So go ahead.
It's actually funny because I just got out of a conversation with someone at work, uh, one of my managers, and he was curious why I work so much. Outside of the fact that I have a task that is kind of large, but it's it's something of my own creation. It's almost like the whole game in itself, effectively. Um, and I just tell him, like, I get up in the morning and all I think about is solving this problem or getting on to the next thing and how I can make something better. And that just drives me. Obviously throughout the day I'll do things like I'll go work out to take a break and think, or have lunch with my daughter or something like that, just to like kind of break up things. But generally it's just like a love for what I'm doing. I mean, to put it to him, like I just was like, hey, like I make games for a living. I know how fun and easy my job is technically, even though making games isn't simple. I get paid well to just show what's in my brain and just make it real. So to me, it's just like I get really passionate about it. And I mean, Jason, you've worked with me for a long time. You know how I am. Like I've always been this way about everything. When I was doing the game reviews when I started out, I was like driving 2 hours to LA, working for 8 hours, and driving back and playing games and writing reviews. Like it was like a nonstop thing. It was just all passion and drive. Um, so I don't like when I hear all of the horrible stories about people crunching in the big studios and stuff like that have come out. Um, Part of me does question what that was. I have been in situations where manager said, "Well, you guys have to work 10 hours," but it doesn't affect me because I already worked that. Um, so it is debatable. You're making games, like regardless of the task, even if it's just like putting in a bunch of items or naming a bunch of items, a super monotonous, boring thing. Um, you are getting to be creative, and that's what the job should mostly be about. Or you're getting to solve problems, which is also fun. Um, so, I mean, you can definitely be forced to crunch. But from my point of view, the way I look at it, I make games for a living, and making games is fun. So if you're basically telling me you need to continue to have fun, regardless of the issue, regardless of what I'm trying to fix, regardless of the frustration that might be involved there, I just think about, when I get to the other side of this, I've either gotten better, or I've just discovered something, or a whole new way to do something, um, or I just solved a problem that made someone happy. Either way, like I think once I get on the other side of whatever it may be, however long I might be working, I think I'm going to end up being satisfied, even if someone doesn't like what I created. Um, I can still fix it. I can still modify it. I can get feedback. I can change those things. All that is growth to me. And it's all just experience. And in the end, like I said, I just have to look at it as fun. And when it becomes unfun, then I'll stop. I just won't do it anymore.
You said that you can be forced to crunch and that you have in the past. I'm just curious, have you seen that happen a lot to people in general? Because I know personally, like I've
No,
never in the game industry been forced to crunch at all. The closest to crunch stuff I ever had was outside the game industry with things
no, you
that
were you were part of Sigil when we forced crunch.
no, I never had to force crunch.
Oh, that's right.
Maybe
Because you were
design did, but I never had to.
you were QA. There was a point at Sigil where I think it was mandatory. Actually, there was a point at Sigil where it was mandatory. I think 11 or 12 hours. To the point where like I was questioning whether we were violating labor laws. Because I was
Well,
working
and
like crazy.
productivity. Like you work for 12 hours a day, you're not getting 12 hours of work. You're getting like
I
6.
I actually that was a time when because my daughter had been born, early when I joined Sigil. There was a point where I didn't see her. I don't know. I think for like 3 months
Oh,
because I would go home and I would just go to sleep and I'd get up and go back to work. Um, like we would, FaceTime or whatever we could then. Um, but that's mainly just me and my wife and me seeing my son who's a little bit older. Um,
and now that wasn't the whole time though. That was, I assume,
no,
like
that
right
was
before
that was
launch.
that was
Like,
3 months. It was funny enough. That's the 3 months after 10 years of smoking. That's 3 months where I quit cold turkey during that
oh,
most like one of the most stressful times of my career. I said I have to work more, so I have to stop smoking because a smoke break is 15 to 20 minutes, and that's 15 to 20 minutes where I could actually be accomplishing something.
right.
Um, so I just stopped smoking completely, and honestly, it was like super super easy, and I think it's probably because I was so distracted. But I was also like learning like SQL and stuff at that time because we had to put in so many items. So like I think like again to go to like learning stuff like that was interesting to me. Interacting with database and learning how to just like manipulate the data and stuff like that to do what was effectively impossible otherwise for one person to do at that point, considering the amount of items we were putting in. Because I think you could craft in the end like some like 3 million different items.
I remember seeing that database. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
millions
yeah,
of
yeah.
items. Yeah.
So like that is, I mean, you were there for that. I don't know what there had to be a demand across the studio because
Well, you know,
QA.
when I started, the day I started until I got laid off, my manager was on vacation.
Oh, okay.
That could have had something to do with it. That order may have never come down to our department because my
Oh,
manager Ed was actually on vacation until the layoffs happened. So
oh wow.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, that
it's
crunch
messed
did
up.
affect me. I had a
Well, it sounds like they saved your
I had a
life. They got
break.
you to stop smoking. That's kind of the
Well, I had a
TLDR. Crunching saved your life.
well, yes, I am thankful for that because I don't think I would have stopped smoking if it wasn't for that particular situation. Because I haven't been in a situation like that again. But I had like a massive like breakdown in front of the design team one day when someone like violated a rule, and I was so angry because people were going against standards, and I was just frustrated and tired, to the point where one of the seniors was like, and I'm not a senior at this point, even though I had a workload that was effectively senior designer's workload. Um, One of the designers pulled me; they wouldn't even let me in the building. They're like, "You need to go home and go to sleep." So they just gave me 2 days off.
I imagine you've probably been sent home to rest multiple times from overworking,
Um,
or at least told to go home, told
yeah,
to go
yeah,
take a break.
yeah. Yep.
Like
Um,
sleeping in the office again.
the studio I'm at now, I went through another like kind of crazy crunch 2 years ago because I had a large workload, and it's like a lot of data manipulation. I really love doing that stuff. And like people would come in the morning and they're like, "Well, when did you get here?" "Oh, I've been here since like 3 a.m." And they would be leaving late at night, and I'm still there. And they're like, "How are you?" "I have a lot of work to do, man. Like it's just I just have to do. I have to get work done. You're relying on me to get my work done. I'm relying on you to get your work done. It's gotta be done. Let's do it."
What about you,
Um,
Yora? You got thoughts on crunch stuff before we take this other
Before
question?
that, Salim, I'm glad you're back in health. Please do take care of yourself and sleep well. um, just wanted to say that since you mentioned it.
I will. I will.
Also, happy Valentine's and stuff. Regarding thoughts on crunch, I have a very explicit anti-crunch mentality because I have a history of being a workaholic and being incredibly passionate about going all in on things I'm interested in. And that was a recipe for disaster for me a few years ago because I burned myself out really, really, really bad in terms of overworking. I wasn't told to crunch, to be fair. That was entirely on my own fault. But ever since then, I've kind of learned my lesson. And I am trying to maintain a healthier lifestyle. And I don't like seeing what crunch does to people without. Um, I'm mad at people who don't pay as much attention to themselves as to their creations. I get that creations are important to people, but you can't make creations if you're dead. So take care of yourself well. You're the first priority in order to keep making stuff. Don't crunch is what I'm trying to say. As much as I understand needs of companies and meeting deadlines and all that, I am very much anti that. And I'm trying to help manage things so that none of us ever need to. I don't have much to say on the subject, but please make sure to take care of yourself and avoid crunching if you can. Usually, crunching is things you can avoid because they happen as a result of increasing scope beyond what was told to you in the timeline you have.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
You can
If a
definitely do
manager
it.
decides to want something that you don't have allocated time for, or whether the workers themselves decide to put one extra little thing and that ends up creating more work for others and that propagates into more for the original, it can be a slippery slope. Worker zeal is something that's very hard to tone down because, as Salim, as you mentioned, people get passionate about what they make, and when we work on games are literally programs designed for entertainment. So if you get to work on the entertainment part, yeah, I totally get that.
Yep.
I, however, am a programmer, so I don't get to work on the entertainment bit. I get to work on solving technical problems that nobody cares about because it's not running the game. So I do get to feel the crunch effect, in essence, sometimes. But I had a workaholic mentality, so I wanted to get through with it and like, yeah, I can finish this. I can get things done.
Yes,
Not
it happens to
something
all
I'm
of us.
proud of.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
all same thing with me and Salim and probably most of the game developers that I know. They
I
get that same thing. They're not never really forced, or very rarely forced. Salim's the most forced that I know to crunch, but just kind of automatically doing it because it's what we like to do. But yeah, overall, I would say that I don't find it to be like and maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here too on your thoughts. But what I see in general in the industry is that it's not really a big issue. It's not like a widespread thing where people are working 60 hours a week regularly. It's a rare thing that happens in some places at some times, but a lot of places just generally avoid it and don't have that problem or have it very minimally and to the point where it's primarily like people volunteering it and their managers sometimes often telling them to cut back and stop working so much. I see that more,
Yeah.
I think, than the opposite or the inverse.
Yeah,
well,
so it's regulated in some places pretty well. I think when Cyberpunk had a crunch, so to speak, and paid overtime, they by law could only allow this much amount of overwork. You literally could not legally work more than the amount it was
yeah,
told. So there are places that work on regulating worker health, and that's very important. And I don't think anyone should be glorifying crunch. And reaching any point of said crunch, it's never fun to hear about. Um, Unless somebody is going on a voluntary wild adventure with a very limited scope that they do end up healthily within 2 weekends, fine. But seriously, just don't crunch if you can help it.
I mean
And if
that's
you
what
want
crunch
horror
is.
story
Yeah.
examples, try looking at Fortnite on release and also
Oh yeah.
BioWare on Anthem.
Yeah, and to your point about you not getting to see the entertainment, one thing I always carry on my shoulders, just personally, which is also kind of a driver for me, is um, whenever I'm making something, I understand that it's not just me doing it. That as a designer, I'm getting a lot of support because I'm not an artist, I'm not a programmer. Um, so I want to represent what other people are doing as best I can because like I'm the guy that's making all this stuff function. I'm basically presenting this thing to our customers, but it's not my thing. So if I screw something up really bad, then all the art time that went to that is effectively nothing. All the time spent supporting me with any software coding or anything like that is effectively nothing as well. Um, so like I carry that whenever I'm doing something. I'm just trying to think about how best I can represent the people who are supporting me as a designer because I can just come with a design in my brain and just figure out how to do it. Um, but in the end, it doesn't mean anything if it's like really good. Although people will argue that gameplay will definitely always trump bad art or bad code. Although bad code can certainly screw over gameplay. Um,
A bad code can
uh,
never ruin a game, Salim. It's always the designer's
um,
fault or the terrible artist.
but
Code is
What's
always
that?
good.
Stutters and glitching and going through walls? No, no, that's a feature, and that's
Design
the
problem.
designer's
That's a
fault.
design problem.
um, but yeah, someone made a comment about how do you get out of burnout. As a person who has gone through it multiple times, uh, sometimes you just kind of wake up and you're over it. Sometimes you just need something to distract you, or sometimes you just stop working 12 hours a day and you just do 8 hours and see what that's like. Um, and maybe just a week of that will get you out of it. I know I've had to do that in the past. I'm not a big vacation taker um, because I don't like getting out of a rhythm. But I will just decide, you know what, I'm done with this. I've been working too much. Um, I'm just going to work 8 hours today, or I'll work 5 hours. It doesn't really matter. Um, as long as I get my work done in the end, that's all that should matter, and I'm available when people really need me. So like that's how you get out of burnout.
I just like
Don't
how
let it
your
happen.
idea of taking a break is you're gonna work 8 hours a day.
What's that?
Like, I'm gonna
Oh,
take a break. I'm gonna work 8 hours today, maybe 5,
um,
probably.
uh, but yeah, I like it, it's. I think that when it's personal crunch, although I don't classify that as crunch, um, when it's personal passion and desire, and you're just pushing yourself a bunch, that is on you, and you have to, to your point, you have to take care of yourself. You have to think about how much you can handle. When it's forced, and it's just like pushing you beyond what you can handle, then if you're at any place that's professionally responsible, you tell them, I can't do this, and they should react in kind. They should support you as best that they can. If you're at a place where they're not doing that, then if you want to keep suffering through it, you must be getting paid a bunch, or you just want to kind of release a title, which is like a huge thing for specifically for designers. Is I want to get this title at the door because it's a point on my resume, and then I can get out of here. I will kill myself to get this credit, which I think nowadays is less of a big thing on a resume. Like seeing that what you worked on, or having your own like website and stuff set up.
Yeah, I think it's just easier to show without
Yeah,
necessarily needing the
yeah,
bullet
yeah.
point. The bullet points still help a lot, but
Um,
you
but
there are other ways to show it now.
yeah, but I mean, if you're
Yeah.
working on a what you call it, a COD game, it's a big name game, right? It's working with obviously a
You're
prolific engine, stuff like that. So like, I want to get this credit, because people see it and they instantly are like, all right, this guy must be legit, which is unfortunate because it's not true. um, yeah, it's
Yeah.
rarely like 100% valid, but yeah.
there's
So good.
there's two things to say about that, which is you can prove that you worked on a game without having game the name in the credits on a release. You had the months of work.
Yeah,
You have the proof.
yeah,
And it's something that's worth to remember. You don't have to have sunk cost fallacy in order to survive in the future. That's literally why the name of the fallacy exists.
yeah,
Something to bring up. And beyond that, you mentioned it earlier, but if people can't provide the best they have for you, remind them that you're on the same team, because that's something that tends to happen when everything breaks down or crunch times. People will forget that they're working together, and they all have their own little holes where they bunch up in their caves and they don't
yeah,
communicate as well. And it's really, really important to remember. Everybody's working in the same team trying to ship something together that's going to be significant to all of them. So they should all provide the best they have for each other.
yeah. People function in cliques in business just like it's high school, and it drives me nuts. Like it's just go talk to each other. I mean, it's seemingly more difficult now because you're not in the office, but it should also be super easy because all you do is faceless chat. Um, so it seems like people who are that way, whether they're just shy or whatever, should like be much easier for them to communicate. That's just from my point of view. I would assume so.
I think you
Um,
just gotta put them all in VR headsets to solve the problem.
it's
Get them
actually more
all into
difficult for
VR
me.
headsets into a Facebook meeting, and
Oh God, stop.
and then all the communication issues will go away.
Um,
So
it's actually more difficult for me remote because I'm used to those are my breaks, is getting up from my desk and going and getting some people together to talk about something because people are not talking. Like that's the thing. And also I get to, I guess, have a more of an intimidating presence when it comes to that because I take those things very serious. And I will just be very blunt with people. When you're doing that in teams, like my head's down working, I'm not leaving my desk. So I will just like, I will find that I've actually completely shut off. But, people ping me and stuff like that and communicate, get them on voice and all that stuff. But it's actually more difficult for me, a guy who likes to talk a bunch. Uh, and apparently it's still difficult for people who don't talk a lot, even though they're removing all of the like tension of being face to face. So it's kind of a weird structure now with the remote stuff, at least for me.
yeah, I think it's harder to kind of just jump into conversations with with remote stuff than it is in person, where you can kind of see the people, see the all the interactions and stuff. I wanted to get to this question real quick,
Yes.
Uri,
Yeah.
about addressables. We
Yeah.
popped it up earlier, and I want F Color 04 to at least
Yeah.
maybe have an answer to this. And it was just about what we think about addressables preloading on Awake and whether or not that defeats the purpose of them. They use them to avoid manually assigning references, but not sure if it's worth the case when I have to preload.
So I wanted to bring this up earlier, but they still have their full point, which is they let you address an asset to load into memory and then unload it when you need to. And that applies to the ability to do this more than just on Awake for specific things. You can do this from a non-game object with an Awake script attached. And you can also do this for partial things. You can have a player game object that doesn't have a player model on it, and you can dynamically load a specific model on your Awake. And you will not pay the cost of having to know about everything in advance. The swap from resources to addressables is huge because resources are included in all your builds, and they load without your control or consent, even if you didn't mean to have a reference somewhere, but you made a mistake. They will load that in full into memory without an ability to unload it until this thing is gone. With addressables, you have control, and control is powerful. So enjoy
You want
it.
to briefly tell the very beginners why they might care about it? I mean, if you're a very new beginner, you probably don't care about it. But what's the scenario where they do care about unloading stuff? Why does that matter, and when does that come
So
into play?
low spec devices have a limited amount of memory that you can fill up. And if you run out of memory, bad things happen. For example, an out of memory crash.
Mhm.
Um,
Or your
and
game could just close on like an iPhone or something, right? Or just
yeah,
close
and
right up.
yeah, or another situation is even if you don't instantly get locked down from using all your memory, you leave very little, and then whatever memory you generate at runtime can reach that cap, invoke the garbage collector trying to clean up memory so you can use more, and let that happen more frequently. And that will slow down your game because garbage collection is a slow process. And it's going to happen over and over and over. Quickly, you'll
If you
see
start
frame
pushing those
drops.
limits. And now I
Yeah.
just want to really quickly clarify though for like the super beginners that if you're not loading and unloading a bunch of assets, if everything in your game is always loaded all the time anyway because it's always part of the game, you're not going to get anything from it. It's more for
Yeah.
if you have, multiple levels and on this level you have a bunch of memory usage because you've got a bunch of assets, or this set of characters you've got a bunch of memory usage, but you're not always going to have those ones. Maybe you've got 30 different character models they can pick from and they're picking one. You don't want to load all 30 into memory. You want to load the one in. If you have one character model or two character models in one level, learning addressables is probably a distraction until you need it. So don't jump into the trying to deal with the memory part until you actually have stuff to unload. But once you need to deal with stuff or have a bigger project where you have things that are getting loaded and unloading, destroying the object alone does not remove it from memory. You need to jump to addressables to start managing that and actually removing the unloaded objects that you're no longer using so that you can save
Um,
that memory. And it's more complex than that, but that's kind of
yeah.
the core. I just don't
Uh,
want people to think like, oh, I need to go learn this right away. I'm a beginner, because you don't. Like it's not a beginner.
um, Two intermediate tips. There is resources unload all unused resources, so you can actually ask Unity to unload these things manually. That said, you don't know if they are ready to be unloaded because you don't know if they're in memory or not.
And that
And
was on the
the
resources dot unload all unused assets, right?
yeah,
For
something
when
like
you
that.
if you use the other version instead of addressables.
Yeah. And for people who want to use addressables and think they are capable of it, there are a ton of benefits from using them. So you can load assets asynchronously, which is huge because you get to invoke a tiny bit of latency to have an entirely smooth game. When loading large assets that would usually get a little hung up because of all the IO calls, etc., etc. So That's one big benefit. The other thing is you can actually download addressables by demand at runtime. So you can send packages to people and then just dynamically download whatever you need and even update those things on the fly. So the person can get an up-to-date version of the game without restarting it, just by loading in new assets for whatever got updated. So addressables are huge. You can learn them and utilize them really, really nicely. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah. Totally agree. I just again wanted to make sure that people didn't think that that's like a mandatory thing that they need to do until they're at that point. But yeah, if once you're loading up a lot of assets and your game's getting bigger, definitely worth looking into. And it's I also very big for those updates. If you want to do over the air updates without having to go through and do like an app store update or an Android update, you can actually patch a lot of your game just through addressables if you set it up that way. Which is very, very cool.
So, are you saying that memory management you shouldn't care about if you're just starting out?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, to be honest, yes. If you're just starting off, you shouldn't worry about memory
Yeah.
management because you're not going to be doing anything that's big enough to hit anywhere near limits unless you make a giant mistake. You worry about memory management after you've got the kind of fundamentals and basics down and you understand the flow. I think that being able to figure out the logic and flow is a more important early skill than being able to keep track of what objects are loaded and unloaded in memory and how much memory is available because memory management really just comes down to you have this much space, you can't fill it up, you keep putting things in, eventually you got to take things out, and you have to figure out the method calls and the ways to store objects so that that's possible. But until you get to that point, it's not really an issue. Most things that I work on don't need to worry about memory management until it gets huge. Like if you're building an MMO with lots of levels, yeah, memory management's going to be important. Building a single game with a couple levels in it or a single level, you don't need to care at all.
So,
The
would you?
I just want to say I'd go even further and say don't care about memory management until you're trying to ship your game on any low-end device because it will literally not manifest unless you're making the biggest game ever with like 10,000 units with assets that are 4K. It's not going to manifest in most cases.
So,
Like you
would
said,
you?
the small devices though, that's where you'll
Yeah.
hit it first. You go to like an old iPhone or even a new one, it's going to be way worse than a PC.
Would you? Are you giving this advice just from a game developer standpoint or just general programming? Because in pretty much any general programming course that I've taken, like memory management is introduced fairly early.
So
I haven't.
C++ classes because you have to.
Well,
You
I guess
have to
yeah,
actually
C
take
and C++.
control.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess you're right.
And it's
Uh,
because you actually are required to, well, at least in the older versions, you have to be very explicit about how you
yeah.
manage every bit of memory. Most of that in newer languages is just mostly automagic and dealt with. Obviously, there are issues and reasons that we load and unload stuff, but for the majority of stuff, we don't have to deal with those little memory allocation issues until you get to high performance or low spec devices.
So to touch on that a bit more, there are languages that feature a garbage collector and will track the
Yeah.
references to what you're using. And once you stop using something, that garbage collector say,
Yeah.
"Oh, I know you're not using it anywhere. I'm going to get rid of it for you." And that solves most of the issues for most people. Now, it's important to know if you're trying to be a programmer about these things because they slow down applications, and that is going to uh, mainly for enterprise things that are going to run at scale. This is
Mhm.
going to matter because it slows down the processes and it's making things not run as well on machines that are not for gamers,
Yeah.
and it manifests itself more depending on what you do, especially within big data.
Yeah.
You're going to
Yeah, it
have a lot
becomes
of
like
memory
cost,
involved.
right? It
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah,
turns into cost, like hourly cost and memory cost on the servers and all that stuff. With
yeah,
games,
but
it turns
games,
into performance.
yeah, in games in terms of performance, and also it tends to be small scale enough that it's not an issue.
It's just interesting to compare the concept of game versus non-game and what is more important and why. At least it's interesting to me. But yeah, I know that the garbage collection is like the main feature for C sharp versus C++. Um, It's also like, you'll get arguments about C++ is better than C# and all sort of random crap that people want to say. You use the right tool for the right job. So it's just interesting to get some insight in that, because I'm pretty sure that Mr. Jason Weimann has given me crap about proper memory management in the past.
That seems unlikely. I doubt it. Maybe it's possible. My memory is bad too, so
when I was messing with some stuff in the VR games, yeah. I think I messed up a few things.
It's
But
possible.
like,
I that was
obviously
probably more source control management and uploading 2 gig textures to get like what the come in, download like 15 minutes. Like wait, what changed last night? Oh, it's a texture.
It's one of those late nights, man. I was
Late
just
night
still working.
textures. All right. Well, I think we're almost at time. You guys got any final words or the last things you wanted to share or talk about before we wrap it up? Other than I know Dave's got a video that I wanted to drop into chat and make sure that everybody goes to check out. If I can find it.
I just want to remind everyone to have a wonderful Valentine's Day and a fantastic time.
Yep. Yeah. I forgot.
And Salim,
Have
who's
an
supposed
excuse
to
for
win the Super
happiness
Bowl
that you
this
can.
year?
What's that?
I said, who's supposed to win the Super Bowl this year?
I think it'd be nice if the Bengals won. I like Joe Burrow. I don't think the Bengals have ever won a championship. But it's nice that the Super Bowl is two, teams that certainly don't make it there that often. So it'll be an interesting game. I'm not like I don't have a horse on either side, but I think it'd be cool if the Bengals won, just from a football history standpoint. By the way, I hope the game's fun. Hope it's not a stupid blowout, because those are boring.
I should have started that question right at the beginning so everybody could have a big argument about it in chat about who's going to win.
I guess there's some video of some guy in a plane getting thrown off because he went on some rant about the Cincinnati Bengals. Yeah, people take sports way, way too serious.
Oh, yeah, I would imagine. I expect the entire neighborhood's going to be loud and crazy today. It'll be interesting. I want to see if Dave shows up at the Super Bowl randomly again too. Just watch and see Dave on there waving at people. It is right by his house. I mean, it's like a 10-minute drive from where he lives. Like he's just down the street. Hop on over. Wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, he's been there before. He knows people. So,
otherwise, it feels good to be seen again, I guess. I'm not dead. I am quite alive, although I felt like I was dead for about 2 weeks. And I'm
glad you're back, and please be healthy.
I'm still physically recovering from that cold. I got it from a kid. I got it from a 5-year-old.
That's where we all get it from.
Yeah,
it's the kids.
Damn kids.
They bring in the viruses.
But yeah, hopefully I'll be around next week and many more after that. And I can use it as a break from work.
Yeah, definitely come back. I want to talk about game design stuff a lot. I've had a lot of game design topics I wanted to talk about, but I've been waiting for you.
With me, you don't.
Yeah.
Why?
Because you played every video game in existence.
God, here we go with this.
Except Horizon Zero Forbidden West that's coming out this weekend.
Yeah, I don't have a PS5, so.
Oh, well, then you should sign up for Backtrace's. What is it called again? The Jam. They're giving away a PS5 to a random person. Just enter. It's the GameDev conference. It's online on Tuesday. It's totally free. I'm going because they got a plastic one on source control for Unity as the first talk.
Oh wow!
So I'm gonna go check it out and maybe win a PS5 because I also don't have one yet. I was talking about that earlier.
I got
links in the description, Salim. You can go sign up.
I will do that, but I mean, Dave, but he's so far had 5 PS5s that he's just gotten legit and just sold them. So I'm like, I need a PS5. He's like, all right, cool. I'll see if I can get you one in a week. I'm like, all right, I guess. You have the hookup, so I'm hoping that I get one there.
I've been waiting for Best Buy to have them. They keep offering video cards now, but not.
Don't get a. You've seen the whole thing of Best Buy and a $200 thing to get video cards.
Yeah.
The tech thing or whatever.
Yeah, I already have it. I got tricked into it a while ago when I was getting some other stuff. Fine.
Has it worked out? Is it good?
Yeah, it's great because it gave me a warranty on everything and let me return a cell
Oh,
phone already without paying the fee on it. So
maybe I'll look
it
into
made it waived a bunch of like fees and stuff too. So it ended up being worthwhile after the return. It's paid itself off. So it did a phone exchange, and after that, it's actually paid
Interesting.
off. So I don't know. And then it gave me access to see what's on sale. I kind of wanted to just see what was on sale too. And they asked me every single time I went into Best Buy, and I go there a lot. So I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
okay, fine.
maybe I'll look into it.
You can sign into my account and see what's on there if you want to check it out.
Oh sweet, I'll
See
just
if
use your
it's
account.
worthwhile.
I'll just use your account, your credit card.
Breaking
You might come right
terms
to me.
literally on camera.
Well,
That's
you
really
sign
easy
in
for you.
with me. I'll show you. See what's there. I mean, I
Breaking
gotta
the game
order. I gotta pay
design.
for this stuff.
I mean,
So if you want to see what's there, get an idea of
I've seen
if
the
it's
chair in your
worthwhile.
office, so I know what you can afford. So it's fine.
All right. Well,
All
I
right.
guess we'll wrap it up here. I just wanted to say thanks again, everybody, for coming out. Thanks, Salim and Yorai, on both directions. And thanks to everybody for watching. Please hit the subscribe button and share the stream. Helps a lot more than thumbs up. Thumbs up is good, I guess.
Oh,
But
okay. Sorry.
subscribe and share helps a lot more. So
Share.
either one of those.
I don't know if
And
the sign is
check
for
out.
share, but
Yeah. You can hit like too. And
yeah.
then check out all the links down in the description below. Make sure that you go check out the event on Tuesday. There's a link, like two links down or one link down. And then go check out the courses and the assets and everything else that's available there. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks again. And we will see you all next week.
David, stop.
Did you put David's link there?
Oh, David's video. I dropped it in chat. There it is one more time. And it will also be right at the top of the description as soon as I hit the end button and go edit it. So I'll see you all next week. Thanks again, everybody. And I'm going to hit the outro button right now.